Welcome one and all to the Stock Up Podcast, your one-stop shop for stocking up on the information you need to qualify for the Pro Tour. I'm Alex. I'm joined today by my co-host, Jacob Negro. How it goes?
Good. How are you doing, Alex?
I'm good. A bit tired, I'll admit. I might have said that before on the podcast, so I feel bad. But this weekend, this whole last week, I've been really busy.
Gotcha.
Picking up some night shifts and then eBay Store and TCG Player. I've been busy with that as well, so haven't had a ton of time to play the new Edge of Eternities sealed and draft, which is unfortunate because the set looks pretty sweet.
Yeah, I've been liking it.
I did practice some standard because I played in a stupid standard RCQ over the weekend.
How'd that go?
It went okay. I played blue-white control, and it was a small tournament. I think it was 10 people.
Gotcha.
But pretty much save for like maybe one person who seemed like he was actually kind of new to standard, pretty much everyone I played against was a killer. And in the top, I lost in the top 4 to a mono white deck. So really had me wishing I had stayed home to play
the Arena
in the Arena Direct, yeah. Which I assume, well, I know you played it because you were sending me pictures of your decks, and I was pretty jealous. So how'd your weekend go?
Good. Yeah, I won 4 collector booster boxes.
Nice.
I did not count how many attempts I did, but I can say I only put $200 into my Arena account over the course of the weekend, and I still have like 10,000 gems.
I think I noticed that, well, first of all, it wasn't as expensive as Final Fantasy. I know they're still toying with the numbers, but I think probably what's going on there is the Universes Beyond sets are going to be more expensive. But then I also feel like the gem payout for not winning was a little more generous. Did you think it was too? I don't remember the exact numbers, but...
Yeah, it felt more generous, but maybe that was the difference. I know I had a run that I ended 6-2. And that one paid out 13,000 gems in like 48 packs or something, and it's only 6,000 to enter, so quite a return on gems, especially at this point.
Maybe it was
have,
the
like, all the
same.
Cards. Maybe it's
but
the
it was
same,
cheaper
but it
to
feels
enter.
better. Yeah.
And it's cheaper to enter, so it's sort of like more because you get more entries. So
It's kinda
I did get to
because, like, you could go 6-2 and then turn that into 2 boxes potentially,
right?
Instead of just one. If you.
Yeah, I always thought it was a little funny you didn't get gems for the last one. I understand why they don't do it.
Yeah.
But in some ways, especially for the play boosters, where they're worth significantly less, I could see the argument for just kind of wanting the 6-win prize, especially if you don't want to like sell the boxes or something.
Yeah, I mean, if you were a master of the game that could never lose unless you wanted to, then your ideal setup would be to go alternating between 6 and 7 wins, because you would never have to, you would net gems and still get boxes.
Right. I did. So Friday night, I had a chance to play, and I played in 2, and I felt pretty. And that was the first sealed, or I hadn't done a draft. That was the first sealed I did for the format, and I was fortunate to win 1. I felt pretty fortunate.
Nice.
So then I won 1, and then over the course of Saturday and Sunday, I played after work, which was like 2 in the morning, and I did, I think, 3 extra runs between those 2 days and didn't play very well, and that was not very smart, so obviously didn't win any there, but...
Yeah.
So speaking of sealed, we're a lot of sealed actually coming up for this format, so we decided to do our sealed episode for this set today.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, this weekend, the weekend of the 15th, is a Arena Open, where you can win money directly. I believe day 2 will be draft, but day 1 will be sealed. You have as many shots as you are willing to put in money and time as to play day 1, but only 1 shot on day 2 if you make day 2.
Do you like the Arena Directs or the Opens more?
I guess the Directs, just because they're a little less committal to my time. But I guess it also, I think there's a big difference between the ones where you win a collector booster box versus 2 play booster boxes, because the collector boosters always seem like better value.
Yeah, for sure. Even though you get 2 of the play boosters, the collectors lately just seem to be better.
Yeah.
It's funny. I think the Arena Open is like kind of a healthier tournament because it's not as hard to just get 1 win to qualify for it. And then, day 2, you can't just keep buying in. You just play and you lose. I do think on average I've probably gotten more monetary value from the directs though, even though I've cashed a couple of the arena opens.
Gotcha. Yeah,
It's just
I've never
harder.
actually cashed the arena opens. I've just been short a few times.
Yeah, they're tough. I know a lot of good players like to play in them. Day 2 is usually pretty rough.
Yeah, the last one I made day 2 of was an Aether Drift one, and I just remember I had a black-white deck, which isn't one of the best archetypes, that kind of didn't feel like one of the best drafts I'd done. And then on top of that, like, just the games were some of the worst games I feel like I played in that format. And I played a lot of that format.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, pretty exciting for this weekend. And then the following weekend is also the qualifier weekend, which will be sealed. And on top of that, that means that this weekend there should also be a best of 1 play-in, and the Friday before the qualifier weekend, a best of 3 play-in. And
Nice.
I didn't actually look up this event for the qualifier weekend, but if it's anything like previous sealed qualifier weekends I've played, which the last one was a year ago, it was Bloomborough, I think. Maybe there's been one in between. The last one I played, which I did make day 2 of, and it was sealed both days, which surprised me. But I think that's kind of been the case for those.
I can't even remember ever playing in a sealed qualifier weekend. To be fair, I haven't played in many of the qualifier weekends, but yeah. I thought, I didn't even realize sealed was an option for them, I think. So that's cool.
Yeah, it seems like they're probably, I'm going to guess every 6 months, but I just missed whichever one was 6 months ago.
Right. So as we've just alluded to, Jacob's played a lot more of the format than I have at the moment. So I'm actually going to pick his brain a bit into the format specifics. We'll talk about sealed in general, and I'll still have basic knowledge about that to contribute, of course. But it might be good for the viewer. I'll try to ask questions that maybe anyone might have for him. Before we start, I want to remind everyone that you can find us over on patreon.com/stockuppodcast. We have one tier at the moment. It's $1 a month. And for that, you get access to our Discord as well as our exclusive posts. By me and Jacob, we post deck lists and what we're going to play for tournaments and that sort of thing. And of course, if you don't want to follow us on Patreon, that's totally fine. Although we do thank each and every one of our patrons who signed up at the moment. But you can watch us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Yeah, and I finally actually we have somebody actually joined the Discord that asked, and so if you want to join the Discord, I added the link on Patreon finally, and also
nice.
If you know
Perfect.
me or Alex, you can just ask, and we'll link you the Discord as well.
Yeah, and once you're in the Discord, you can ask us anything. We'll reply eventually. We don't have because we just started. I'm grateful for the patrons we have. We don't have a ton, and no one had requested anything from the Discord, so we just hadn't set it up yet. But now that someone has,
and I posted all 4 of my winning decks in a channel there too. So.
Oh, perfect. Those are pretty neat. Did you post your 47 card special?
Notably, I had a 47 card special. There's no strategic reason for that. It's just kind of laziness, but also, to be fair, the cutoff for when the arena directs were over was like 1 p.m. my time on Monday, and I was just kind of on a tablet looking at this deck, I think, since the last night, and decided
up past your bedtime too, right?
It was just like 10 a.m. and I decided I should just submit a deck, so I just added extra lands. To be clear, it's like 47 cards, but it was like 19 lands and also a bunch of mana things. That's part of why it was so weird, is like I was splashing, it was a green-red deck splashing some blue cards and some black cards, and I felt like I could increase like the number of cards in my deck and still be fine with my splash, because I had so many ways to find my one swamp and my one island in addition to some rainbow sources like Command Bridge, that I didn't think it actually like impacted my mana to increase my deck size.
Funny. I sometimes will build constructed decks like that where I have way too many cards and I never play with them, but I'll just leave them, and then sometimes I come back to them and I'm like, oh yeah, this deck has 71 cards. I need to figure out what to cut.
Yeah, like I think ultimately if I wanted to reduce this deck to 40 cards, I would have to cut a color, and some of my fixers would be like the answer.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, it has come up, maybe at least in theory, that you could gain a competitive advantage by playing more than 40 cards in Limited.
Yeah, that has to do.
But
actually, I saw on Reed's stream recently, and I agreed with them entirely. He played against the deck and noticed immediately his opponent had over 40 cards, and he said, if I gave my opponent credit for doing this for some strategical advantage, it would be that they expect a very long game and that their deck is slow because they're expecting to see a lot of their library, and it might come to decking, or they just might think all of their cards are really powerful and they want like a higher quantity of powerful cards, even if it's not a higher density.
Yeah, I experimented with playing with 40 more cards a couple times in Tarkir Dragonstorm Limited because some of those 5-color, mirror matches would come down to who had the most resources in their deck. And so that's a way to get more resources. But I mean, it's very rare. Most of the time, you should be just cutting cards down to 40.
I agree. Yeah, it also
the vast majority of the time.
I know somebody, he posted on Twitter about like people sometimes say, "Oh, I play 41 because my land ratio with 17 or 18 lands and 41 is better." But he basically posted a mathematical proof that just always makes your mana worse playing more than 40 cards. Like you're just increasing variance by adding cards to your deck, and therefore your mana is worse.
Right. I think we kind of learned this intuitively during Yorion Standard.
Yeah.
Where people would play 80 cards and they just felt like their decks were more inconsistent. And I think it's because like you said, you're increasing the variance where you could have deeper pockets of land or no land.
Exactly. You can take it to an extreme that, like, if a Yorion deck had 34 lands, for example, and 80 cards, they could draw 34 lands in a row, hypothetically. Not that one's, exactly right or ever actually going to happen in reality, but the point being is, like, in a 24-land 60-card deck, that's not even possible. So if you take those as outliers and then work your way into a bell curve of an average number of lands you draw, you can kind of understand that your bell curve is wider in both directions.
That might be especially obvious if you start by thinking... like if your deck had 1,000 cards,
Yeah, exactly.
600 land or whatever, you could see how you could easily end up at 10.
Yeah, you could easily. Yeah, exactly. With 600 lands, drawing 10 lands in a row would look really normal in a lot of random situations. Exactly.
Yeah. So we have a couple rule of thumb here for Sealed on the podcast that Jacob came up with and I agree with. So you want to go over those before we get started?
I'll go over the major steps here on how I approach Sealed. This is something I wrote back for our Final Fantasy podcast, but basically, when you're opening your packs or on Arena, in a lot of cases now, when you see your pool, it'll show your rares right away. You want to pay attention to those because those are often going to be your most powerful cards, but I would also just go through all your cards and look at some of your best cards. And I think a lot of what we'll focus on today will be what cards I consider kind of these cards that catch my eye as I'm going through sets in every rarity. Second, I look at all my fixing, usually before I start even building a deck, because sometimes you're going to have fixing that really allows you to play, maybe even a straight 3-color deck or something. I had an interesting pool. I think I only got 4 wins with it, maybe 5. But the rares I got included 2 Creeping Tar Pits, a Watery Grave, a Shambling Vent, and a Godless Shrine. So 5 black lands, all within the Esper color combination. I actually ended up playing a green-black deck, splashing blue and white. But one of the first things I looked at in that pool was if I just took every card I thought was good in the Esper color combination and built a deck, how good's my deck? And to be honest, my green was so good that it looked a little weaker than the 4-color deck. But, that's still like what kind of guided me in building my deck. In this set in particular, the fixing is worse than previous sets. It's not as bad as it looks at first, because there's a lander theme, and also the bonus sheet has lands on it. So those lands, some of them, it's weird. It's a weird mix of the lands being colorless and some of them being multicolor fixers. So it's not that weird to get at least a few lands that are fixing.
Yeah, so the big thing here, if I may point out, is that we don't have any common dual land cycles, which we've had in a lot of the previous
There's a single
sets.
common rainbow land that's also not as good as other rainbow lands historically, but it's serviceable in limited.
That's the one where you have to pay a mana, although it's a little bit better than that because you can tap any.
Yes, you have to tap an untapped permanent you control, or sacrifice it, which is a little bit better. I would say that a card, like one of those cards that just enters tapped and you pick a color, is probably better than that card on average, but there are some unique things about that card. when you're splashing more colors, it suddenly can be like a double fixer in a game where, like I think I had one in that 4-color deck, for example, and the fact that if I draw that land, it's my white, my blue, my black, and my green all in one land consistently. That matters. Anyways, as far as more points go, I pay attention to my curve a lot in Limited. For example, I didn't post my whole pool, but my second box win was with a blue-black deck where my black included 2 Tragic Trajectories, 3 Gravpack Monoists, an Elegy Acolyte, among other things, a Sunset Saboteur, just some pretty strong cards, and like this is 3, 7, 9, sorry, counting out loud. It's already 15 black cards, so it's most of my deck. And I at first thought I had some pretty powerful red cards, but a lot of them were 3 or more cost cards. And my blue just had like a couple Cryogen Relics and a couple Code Cracker Hounds as big draws to it, in addition to I opened a Watery Grave, so my mana was going to be a little bit better. And that's what made me play blue-black specifically. Black was a clear color to play in that pool, and then I really think that just when I pulled aside my blue and my red cards, the raw power level of my blue and my red cards looks pretty similar, but I had an extra dual land and my blue cards were cheaper. So that's kind of playing into both things about looking at my mana and my curve. And lastly, especially in any kind of best of one format, which I think these following events actually won't be that. Actually, day 1 of the Arena Open can be best of 1. Day 2 will be best of 3 draft, I think, always.
Yeah, I think you can play either best of 1 or best of 3 usually, and then day 2 is always draft.
I find the aggro decks go a lot longer, a lot further in these events. They have a pretty solid baseline, especially in best of 1. But even outside of the best of 1, best of 3 dynamic, kind of the line I would say is that a fine aggro deck can easily beat some of the best control decks or slower decks you face in this format, but a mediocre slow deck is kind of doomed against really powerful bomb-heavy slow decks, because you're going to play a long game where you both see a lot of your cards, and their card quality will just outclass yours.
Yeah, so basically the worst place to be is a bad late game deck. So like a 5-color deck with no bombs is exactly where you don't want to be.
And on the other extreme, even if you open strong bombs, being like a 2-color aggro deck with a lot of strong bombs is still, in my opinion, the best place to be, because you still have powerful late game tools at your disposal and high card quality potentially.
Yeah, that's probably almost certainly the case. Those decks are not very likely to come together, so you have to be careful when you're not shoehorning things. You do need lots of cheap creatures to build an aggro deck.
Aggro also, like, to be clear, does not necessarily mean you're playing pump spells or playing weird gimmicky cards. It just means that you have like a solid curve of creatures and like good creatures to start the game.
Yeah, and creatures that have high power, not a bunch of one power guys.
Yeah,
value
and in
creatures
limited,
type of thing.
The limited especially, you will have a lot of non-games where an aggro deck can really punish your opponent for stumbling or missing their 3rd land drop because they kept a 2-lander on the draw, or they kept a hand that doesn't cast a relevant spell till turn 4. Those are all things that are not uncommon in a game of Sealed, especially. Decks that can capitalize on that matter a lot. Like I said, or like you said, it's Sealed. You don't get to pick that you have a good curve, but those things do matter when building your deck and looking at your options and what color combos you could play.
Yeah, totally. And then, and like you said, the aggro deck thing is exasperated by the hand smoother. Basically, that's why they're better in best of 1 for the most part. I mean, I guess
they are better.
Your opponent could sideboard against them too, but
like I would definitely say my ideal perfect Sealed deck, if I had a perfect pool, would be just still like a 2-color deck with a bunch of rares in 2 colors and a good curve, like
agreed.
It's not some 5-color thing with a bunch of rares. You just do that because it's Sealed and you don't have the option to play all your rares unless you play a bunch of colors.
Right, yeah. A lot of the time the best Sealed pools will have, 5 rares in 2 colors or whatever. So those are just kind of our bullet point steps for some fundamentals. I'll go over them one more time as a TLDR. First step is to pay attention to your rares and best cards to try to fit them in your deck. Step 2 is look at all your fixing, lands, and then sometimes green cards, depending on the format, as they'll provide extra fixing. Step 3 is to make sure you look at your curve and that you have enough cards that cost less than 3 mana, especially. And then step 4 is consider playing an aggro deck. even though most sealed decks won't be aggro decks, a fine aggro deck can often beat a bad, slower control deck, so to speak. And if you would like to brush up on your fundamentals of sealed, you can always go back to our Final Fantasy episode. Even if you just listen to the beginning of it, that's where we touch on these basics a little bit more. We go into depth over each point. In the meantime, of course, we will be talking about the specifics of this format.
Yeah.
And I'm going to leave this up to Jacob as to where we start. So what's been your opinion of this sealed format?
I found the sealed format to be fine. I think more so in sealed than draft in this format, you can splash a third color often with the landers. I guess I'll point out just ahead of time some thoughts about that. There are more green and red cards, at least that are good, that produce landers and more reliably, I would say. So those are often colors that are going to allow you to splash a third color. And also the way a lander works is, you have to pay 2 and sacrifice this artifact. And these cards are generating them more on like turn 3 or 4. So it's not really the same thing I maybe mentioned in the previous sealed episode, where splashing for 2 drops is not going to like work out as well, because you have no possible chance outside of maybe 1 basic to play that 2-drop on turn 2. It's more for splashing something that you really need later in the game.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So typically when you think of fixing a lot of, especially in like a card that provides fixing instead of a land, they're usually cheaper and oftentimes like ramp spells or cheap filter creatures. There's a lot of creatures, for example, Cav a Landseeker in red. That's the 3 in a red, 4/3 menace. When it comes in play, it makes a lander. This strikes me as a pretty good card, and I've been playing with it. How do you consider this as fixing, considering that you're not getting the lander until turn 4, and then, presumably you're not even sacking it until the next turn, and you're getting a tap land when you do?
Yeah, that's exactly an example of a card I was talking about. If anything, it also incentivizes like splashing maybe even a single card. It's just a thing that as you have like multiple in red, for example, there's Cav Landseeker and there's also Orbital Plunge, which is also 3 in a red common sorcery. You deal 6 to a creature, and if any excess damage was dealt this way, you get a lander. So those are both like 4 mana commons that impact the board that get you a lander. They're both very strong, even if you're not splashing. But you just kind of notice when you play these games that, well, I could put like 1 basic of a different color in my deck and find it by the late game pretty reliably in my deck. And that's, I guess, I'm counting those as sources, but kind of to my point, you don't want to play a lot of cards that you need this color for. You just maybe want to play the 1 or 2 most powerful ones in that color.
Gotcha. So in that same vein, I mean, in general, when you splash, you don't really want to splash cheap cards. I imagine this makes that problem even worse, right? Whereas if you're getting your land pretty late into the game,
it becomes more impossible than usual. I actually think splashing cheap cards with lands is totally fine. Not a high quantity.
Sometimes you draw them.
Yeah, like when you just have 4 white sources in your deck and you have, I don't know, or let's say it's a different format and you have 4 black sources in your deck and you have a pack rat in your deck, like it's just going to line up sometimes that you can play the pack rat onto, and it's, you see a pretty big sample of your deck by your second turn still, 8 or 9 cards potentially. That's could potentially be, it's almost 25% of your deck. It's not that weird to still play these cards on turn 2, but when it's different and you're just like, oh, I've got 5 cards in my deck that make a lander and 1 plains, now all of a sudden you're only out to playing a 2-drop is that 1 plains.
Gotcha. So definitely watch out for that. So a lot of the splashing, what the landers are they in every color?
So I know they're in red and green primarily because they're a little bit of a landfall theme, but I can think of a black card, a white card. I'm not sure if there's a blue card that makes a lander. Now that I'm thinking about it,
I'm looking through the set and I don't see any blue cards that make landers. So that's interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah, there's a green, blue, gold card that's very strong that does it. But yeah, the black and the white card is not reliable. You have to have less lands than your opponent, and the black card is a 2 mana 2/1 that has to die. And I like that card, but that's even less reliably a lander, and it's could be really slow if that creature just can't get into combat correctly. So I'm not a big fan of counting that as fixing either. It's mostly Cav Landseeker, Orbital Plunge. We've got in green the Galactic Wayfarer. I don't have this as a particularly strong card, but Sammy's Curiosity, which is just the 1 mana, gain 2 life, make a lander. And then like a red, green, rare, green, blue, uncommon. There's some things kind of littered in there, but
so it's mostly in green and red that you're looking for your fixing. In red, I browsed the 17 lands data for sealed before doing this, just to get an idea. I looked at a card called Terrapact Intimidator.
Yep.
The 1 in a red 2/1 when it comes into play, create 2 landers, or your opponent may have you create 2 landers or put 2 +1/+1 counters on this creature. And that card actually has a pretty high win rate. How do you like that card?
Yeah, that would be on my list. That's certainly not a reliable way to get landers, and most of the time this card's a 2 mana 4/3, which, is amazing. Your opponent obviously has some option to it. I faced this card turn 2 on the draw and felt like I had no shot of winning if my opponent had a 2 mana 4/3 right then, so I give them the landers. But I'd say a lot of the time this is 2 mana 4/3, which is why it's probably really good. But it's kind of those choice cards historically, people will tell you they're usually bad because your opponent always has the option. But this card is just really good for 2 mana no matter what your opponent gives you.
Do you find that you have to have this card kind of in the first few turns for it to be effective?
No. It's really easy to both make use out of landers, and also I think in limited, a 4/3 is going to trade for a card, like a real card in the game most of the time. So, you can if they don't give you the 4/3, I think you can make good use out of the landers. Even in the late game, you can sack them to various things in the set, or just get some landfall triggers out of them, or ramp potentially from 6 mana to 8 mana and cast some crazy bomb. Or you just get a 4/3, and not that a 4/3 is a bomb or anything, but I'd say usually in my mind around 3/3 in limited, almost across formats, is like a stat line where it's just like, this is a card. Like, your opponent cannot just free roll ignore this thing. There's some virtual card advantage there where maybe they just have a bunch of 4/4s and it never gets into combat correctly, but for the most part that's like large enough to end up being worth something in a game.
Gotcha. And so a 4/3 is even a step above that.
Yeah,
I guess late in the game it could even crew spaceships if they make it a 4/3 and the board's clogged up, which does make me want to ask, before we get into each specific color, about how you feel about spaceships in general, since this is the first time we've seen them.
Yeah, so spacecrafts, they obviously play out pretty weirdly. They like incentivize some not blocking sometimes because you tap these things. You don't always have windows to do it and feel like it's safe, or you might give up too much life total. That being said, they're pretty interesting to play with. But yeah, some notes. Even the best ones in this set, they can be bad at times for that reason. And also, I think they have really high diminishing returns in multiples because it's really hard to, crew multiple spacecrafts or station them throughout the game. But, if you just draw one a game or maybe a second. But in general, that's something I pay attention to. I don't play a deck that just has a lot of them in it.
Couldn't you, in theory, use one giant spacecraft to crew another?
Yeah, but they're surprisingly small sometimes, especially some of the ones I like. Like Fell Graveship, for example, is a 3/2 lifelink once you turn it online. It's not that good at getting into another one. But yeah, you can sometimes.
In the sealeds I did, even though I was playing in the direct, I was trying to learn about the format. So I kind of threw a lot of especially the uncommon spaceships, whenever I have them in colors, I just sort of threw them in my deck. Spacecraft, not spaceship, whatever. And I would say in general, they underperformed for me in my small sample size.
There's also, just different decks are going to be better at doing different things. Your creature count is going to matter. You definitely want, for the most part, to only play them if, the ETB is at least providing some sort of value, which, they try to design them that way, but sometimes they don't play out that way. Or the ETB is just too small a value.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to go over maybe just the ones you like that you think are actually good really quick?
Yeah. Let's see. So I didn't see any particularly in white. I mean, I think the one that anthems your team is fine, but not exceptional.
That's the rare.
Yeah.
That's got to be one of the better ones, though, right?
You'd want a lot of creatures. I think in sealed, sometimes it's hard to get a lot of creatures. Maybe this is more my sealed notes. I think in draft, that card probably performs a lot better than I'm giving it credit for. I just think white is actually going to end up being one of the weaker cards in sealed.
Gotcha. I guess it's the sort of card where you would prefer to basically be curving out since turn 1 or 2 and just playing a creature every turn, which is pretty hard to do in sealed.
Definitely. Or maybe having some tokens or something. Let's see, going on to other ones. I mean, they all of like the ones I see in white have their moments. I've played the Wedge Light Rammer. You know, it makes tokens, gives you 2 bodies, potentially even, you know, if a lot of things in the set in black can sack a creature or artifact. So, you know, that's 2 artifacts in a single card even. The Sarima, if you actually had multiple legends to tutor, it'd probably take more than one. I could see playing. But I guess I'll go over the ones that excite me, because, you know, I had a list of cards that kind of, I see them and I say, I want to put this in my deck. It's not like a maybe. It's just a card I'm pretty happy with. So in blue, Specimen Freighter, that's a little bit closer to the maybe line. That's the 6-mana one that can bounce 2 non-spacecraft creatures. That one, you know, costing 6 means you want to make sure you have kind of a good curve beneath that, because bouncing things is going to reward you a lot more if you can punish your opponent's life total for that. But sometimes even when you're on the back foot, bouncing 2 things is exactly what you need to stabilize you, if you have a decent late game deck. In black, I guess probably the best one that always jumps to my mind is Fell Graveship. The 2 in the black, 3/2. Flying lifelink that takes 8 counters, but when it enters, you mill 3 cards and then return a creature or spacecraft from your graveyard to your hand, not any artifact. That one's just, you know, rebuying something's pretty good. They keep adding this to these kind of Gravedigger effects nowadays where they mill some cards, and that helps so much because, you know, Gravedigger is a 3 and a black 2/2 that when it enters returns a creature from your graveyard to your hands. It's been around forever, and they make all these variants of it. But, you know, if you play a game where no creatures have traded off, then it doesn't do anything. But if this card's your only play, you can just run it out there and hope you hit.
Yeah. And of course, it also, even if you have something in there, you could always hit something better.
Exactly.
So it's definitely pretty nice.
Yeah. And also, I find a 3/2 flying lifelink, you know, when you've committed 8 power into stationing this thing, that's a pretty decent reward, because you can get 3 life back immediately. You know, it's less scary to tap out and have no blockers available if you're getting in a hit in with this.
That's interesting. I don't think I had this one in a sealed, but I did have the other black one, and I didn't really like it. The 5-mana.
Yeah, that's
second on token
one
creature.
I don't play very much, and yeah, that. But the Fell Graveship I splash for. I love that one.
Gotcha. Okay. It does have a high. Crew cost, station cost? Is there a certain number that's like really hard to reach, or
no? It's just gonna be how the games play out. This card being cheaper means it's gonna be easier to reach, right? Because if you run out earlier in the game, it's gonna be less like impactful that random creatures maybe you play along your curve, you just tap them, or maybe if you played a 2/2 on turn 2 and this on turn 3, you could station this over getting in 2 damage, or you could let your opponent hit you for 2 over having a blocker up, and that's totally fine. But later in the game, you know, like when your opponent has a much bigger board, tapping things to station becomes much more costly.
Gotcha. So the expensive ones with a high crew cost are even worse, because you're not really planning on crewing them all up in one turn like you do a vehicle. It's more of you're chipping away at it throughout the game.
Yeah, all of my favorite ones cost 3, to be honest. It's
okay.
Consistent.
I mean, that makes sense with what you just explained.
Yeah.
Do you do anything to set them up if you have spacecrafts in your deck? Like, for instance, do you like the Monoist Century, 1 black defender 4/1?
That card's fine, and yeah, certainly more appealing with the spacecrafts. That just can block and trade in a more defensive deck too. It's also a cheap artifact, and you know, I think it's not hard for black to sometimes convert an artifact into a card. So even though this card did not give you any value sitting in play, it only cost you 1 mana. So it's not that bad if you want to just kind of cycle it later with one of those other cards.
Mm-hmm. One reason I asked about that card specifically is throughout the last couple of years in Limited, I've noticed that defender creatures are a lot worse than they look.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But yeah, having 4 power for stationing's nice. I like Larval Scout Lander, which is the one that lets you sack a land or lander to search for 2 basics. That's obviously fixing. It's also, like I said, it's just cheap. It gets onto the board early, and yeah, I think the opportunity cost, you'll just find way more windows if you are playing a land or playing a spacecraft on turn 3 or squeezing it in on turn 5 with a 2-drop or something, that you'll find way more opportunities to actually get a station. And then even though that one's only a 3/3 flying, it's not even that high impact. It just like can threaten or block and trade or something, and it was still like a 2-for-1.
Okay. That makes sense.
The rare red one that does damage equal to the number of artifacts you control, I think is amazing. That's a 4/3 flying, so that one just kind of hits hard. It only has a station cost of 6. If you kill anything with that card, you're really happy with it. You know, if it does 2 damage and kills their 2-drop, that's amazing.
Yeah, and you can get it down cheap, and it costs only 6. So yeah, I see what you mean. This seems pretty good.
Yeah.
There's a lot of trinkety artifacts in this set too, so getting that number up high doesn't seem too difficult.
Yeah. I guess as far as expensive ones goes, in colorless, there's a rare and a common. The rare is Extinguisher Battleship. I mean, there's more rares to be clear, but the ones I like. Extinguisher Battleship is the 8-mana one that when it enters, destroys a non-creature permanent, does 4 damage to each creature, and it only has a station cost of 5 to be a 10/10 flying trample. So that is kind of doing the opposite of what I said, where it's actually really high impact when you do station it. So that's a card that I certainly play towards. I will say it's closer to a green card than a colorless card. Getting 8 mana is much more Green's thing, and also green is the most likely color to end up with creatures with 5 or more toughness in this set. Usually in general, but I think that's also true in this set. So this is a card that you could play with a 5/5 in play and kill everything except the 5/5, and then immediately use said 5/5 to station it into a 10/10 flying trample. So
Gotcha. This one looks pretty good. What about the mythic? Obviously, you don't want the rare one that just adds mana, but what about the mythic one, Dawnsire?
Yeah, no, I think
Sunstar?
10 before you get any value at all. I would almost never play this card. It would have to be a really weird deck.
Okay.
But
I mean, obviously, it would be really powerful if you turned it on, but
yeah, Pinnacle Killship is kind of a different story. This one, I would just be careful with your curve. I know it has really good 17 lands data. It's the 7 mana. When it enters, it does 10 to up to 1 target creature, and it has 7 station to be a 7/7 flying. Both a high impact body when it works, but also it's pretty much just destroy target creature when it enters. 7 mana to do that's a lot, but in a board stall, this card's amazing. If you're really ahead, it's amazing. If you're really behind, it's mostly just 7 mana murder, which is not ideal and can be clunky, but it's serviceable.
Gotcha. Is this mostly a card you just want to play in a ramp deck, or would you consider it in most decks in a sealed?
Well, I guess this kind of plays towards talking about the thing with landers, because another topic on those, especially with those red 4-drops, I found I'm kind of replacing some of my 5 mana cards, and I'm not playing them so much, but I am maybe playing some more 7 mana cards. So this is kind of in that category where I actually want to like play Kabulan Seeker, and then on turn 5, I don't want 5 drops. I want to play a 3-drop and crack my lander, and then have like 7 mana on turn 6. So it's kind of a red or green card more so. You certainly can play it in other decks, but yeah, I've noticed 7 mana, you're starting to hit territory where you probably care about having some sort of acceleration, but red can do that too in this set. So
right. So like in the same way that normally in green, if you have lots of 2 and 3 mana like rampant growth effects, then you kind of want to skip to either 4 and 5. This one, since your ramp is happening on turn 5, 7 drops are kind of appealing.
Yeah. I guess also there's another common one that I play, not always. It's Wormwall Sweeper, which is the 2 mana, 2/2 flying and needs 4 charge counters, and when it enters, you surveil 2. This is not amazing. It's pretty good at enabling cards that care about being tapped. Or when you warp things, a lot of things with warp will just have 4 power, or the one that's like a 3/2 and a 1/1 that is 4 power. So it's not that hard to turn online if you have a lot of warp in your deck.
That makes sense. I could see this being appealing if you were pretty low on 2 mana creatures.
Yeah, that's kind of when I play it, or once again, if you care about your artifact count, some things like that could matter. It's kind of like a filler card that's a role player, is how I view it.
Okay, makes sense.
I'll skip to this too because we're on the topic that the planets, those are a different category in that they don't cost you any mana to play. So their baseline is going to be a lot better, but their payoffs are kind of weird. The blue and the green one, their 12 plus ability is pretty close to nothing. It's a very win more thing to add mana for each creature or artifact you control. If you have a lot of creatures or a lot of artifacts, you're probably in a really favorable position. But they do enable tapping creatures if you care about tapping your creatures. So you could play them as just basically a tap land that lets you tap your creatures at sorcery speed whenever you want. The black, red, and white ones actually have pretty good payoffs. The red one, especially, is kind of always good. The black one needs certain situations, and it costs you life, and you're stacking your board presence for cards. Only sorcery speed, not amazing. And the white one is a combo if you have good artifacts or enchantments like Banishing Light.
Gotcha. And I get, I'll just reiterate the big thing here is that it's just a land you put in your deck. So
Exactly. So
it comes in tapped, but
yeah.
And then there's all these cards in the set where when they become tapped, something happens. So.
And kind of like I was saying, where when they're cheap spacecrafts, they're easier to station. You find more opportunities. The lands are excellent at that. I find when I have one of these mythic lands in my opening hand, they're getting fully stationed most games. When I draw them on turn 5, I'm like never tapping a creature to them at all. But that's fine. It's just a tap land.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, that covers all the new mechanics that we haven't seen before. You want to go ahead and dive into the colors and talk about those?
So
which cards you like the best? Yeah.
So I do think white is probably one of the least likely colors you'll end up in as a main color in this format. Some of the eye-catching cards, I got the kind of 3 common removal spells of Radiant Strike, Focus Fire, and Banishing Light. All fine. There's some good reason to play main deck naturalizes in this format, so Banishing Light is maybe more vulnerable than it usually is. Not that I wouldn't play it in a white deck. I'd play all of them in my sealed deck, I'm sure. Focus Fire gets better the more creatures and board presence you have, but it can do a great job. It's not weird for that card to have decks where it can kind of kill anything if you have a lot of creatures, as long as it's attacking or blocking. Scales really well into the late game, I'd say. The Radiant Strike's a bit more defensive, but people kind of call those types of cards clunky. It's 4 mana to destroy a tap creature. It can destroy any artifact, by the way. It doesn't have to be a tapped artifact. So that's kind of a nice buyout against some of the rares in the set too. But gaining 3 life helps the card be less clunky by a lot. That can really stabilize you in spots where other removal spells can't.
Yeah, and it makes up for it by, in games when, sometimes on turn 4 it's going to be clunky, you're going to feel it, but in games when mana doesn't matter, like late in the game, for instance, and you need to peel a removal spell, the game 3 life is basically just upside.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And then I guess it's weird to start on white when it has so few, but I have a lot, and on this list of commons in general, across all colors, I have a lot of common creatures that I think really draw me to that color, and white is sort of lacking in this department. I only have Night Luminary, which is the warp thing that makes 1/1s. I think that just can fill a lot of spots on your curve. It's 3 bodies in 1 card. Pretty powerful stuff. Good with warp, or good with station too, because like if you warp it, you have 4 power. But yeah, that doesn't mean I think all the creatures in white are bad. Just simply, those are mostly just I play these because they fill my curve, and can do things. Some of them are kind of bad. In uncommon, I've got a lot more. It's almost all creatures. We've got the All Fate Stalker, which is kind of warps to flicker something, or is a Oblivion Ring type creature, a Banisher Priest. The warp to flicker something adds a lot of value to that type of card. You can kill a token with this. You can flicker your own thing for value. It only hits creatures, but still pretty versatile card. Others, I guess I'll just read them. Dual Suns Adept, Rayblade Trooper, Sunstar Lightsmith, Sunstar Expansionist. I don't want to go too much into detail about these. I think they're pretty straightforward. They're just like good stats. You kind of want to make sure you do the things with these. Starfield.
But these are basically above average cards.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, when you see them. Okay.
Yeah, so if you open a bunch of white uncommons, then yeah, like you're more likely to play white. It
makes sense.
That's kind of how it goes.
And depending, of course, what rares you open matters a lot too. So, are there how many rares in white are even appealing to you?
Yeah, so I listed 6, but they certainly have different kind of tiers to them. So, a Stelly Reclaimer and what's the other one? There's 2 big angels in this set. A Stelly Reclaimer.
Oh, Exalted Sunborn.
Exalted
the flying
Sunborn.
lifelink
Yeah.
one.
So these have warp abilities that can be kind of hard to use, but they're big flying angels, so their baseline is kind of fine. One has lifelink, it's better for that. The other one might give you more value though when you can make it work. They're also both double pipped, so you can't really splash them.
Yeah, they do strike me as their abilities are hard to have work. Like, obviously good when they do, but pretty narrow and depending on what other cards you've opened.
Yeah, I find the Esteli Reclaimer, because that's less obvious of what it works with. Some cards I really liked with it are in blue, actually. Cryogen Relic and Cryo Shatter are both some non-creature, non-land permanents that can end up in your graveyard pretty easily.
Okay. Yeah, the trick with that is because the thing with non-creature, non-land permanents is they don't die very easily.
Yeah, exactly.
Most of them, for them to get in the graveyard, either you have a mill strategy or if they sack themselves in some way.
Or there's like a 1-mana artifact you can pay 6 and tap and sack to destroy a non-land permanent. If I had the Esteli Reclaimer, I'd be much more willing to put that card in my deck.
Yeah, that makes sense. But you don't want to just play it because your opponent might naturalize your banishing.
Exactly. Light. Yeah. I mean, I might play it because it's a 5-mana 5/4 flying, but yeah, I'm not gonna draw. I'm not drawn to white necessarily just for a 5-mana 5/4 flying.
Exactly.
Sunstar Chaplain is like actually a card, and Cosmo Grand Zenith that are like pretty exciting. They're like cheaper creatures that can kind of snowball the game if they're working correctly. And I could see splashing the Zenith even too in a deck, especially in a deck with a lot of card draw if you were blue.
Hylia, that's another rare that strikes me as one that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I haven't had it in a game yet, but it looks pretty powerful. Anything. Also, it's kind of weird because the green and red cards that are creatures that enter common and enter and make a lander would kind of turn this on by itself. So maybe a card you end up splashing in those decks. Because if it sits in play, you could probably get more cards off it in that type of deck.
Another one of these rares that I'm unsure about is Pinnacle Stargate. I'm remembering now that I've done 2 drafts of this format. I had a red-black deck and a green-white, very low to the ground, lots of the 1-mana creature go wide type of deck, and I lost really badly to a Pinnacle Stargate where they just killed 6 of my guys and none of theirs.
Okay.
Yeah. That being said, that's draft.
Yeah.
What do you think of it in sealed?
My appeal to white is kind of things that would get eaten by the Pinnacle Star Cage, so I'm not sure I'd be very excited to have in a pool. Beyond the Quiet, at least hitting everything, you can kind of maneuver a little bit more to it. If you get Beyond the Quiet and a bunch of white removal, then maybe you could pair with another color with some card advantage or something to try to play more of a controlling deck that works out that's still a base white deck. But in your white aggro deck, we kind of talked about this with Ultima before too. Kind of a card you want to avoid. I guess while we're on that topic, this set has a lot of sweepers. That's just something that's going to happen to you.
I've noticed.
People complain about it. It's kind of a weird complaint to me because I think sometimes it's really skill testing and you kind of start learning when you should be playing around these sweepers. And in fact, I've had a couple decks, both sealed and draft in the last week, where I had Mutinous Massacre, which I think is, still ridiculous, the 3 red, black card. But I was a black-red deck, and I played 1 turn weird, and my opponent was good enough to recognize that's because I was setting that card up.
Yeah, it's I wouldn't want every set to have as many sweepers as this one does, but it is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
There's many more. Like a lot of the times a set will have between 0 and 2 sweepers in the rare slot. And this set, I mean, especially if you count little creature sweepers, there's like 6 or something. There's a lot.
Yeah.
It's interesting in white. Over the years, white has really become this focused aggro creature board presence color, design wise, and yet it's also the ones that get the best sweepers. So that's been a conflict in.
I agree.
Where you maybe less so in seal, but especially in draft, it's like a lot of the time you don't even want to pick sweepers if you're playing a white deck because it's just going to be better against your deck than it is against your opponents on average.
Moving on to blue, I've got a short list of commons, but I really like them. It's Cryogen Relic, Cryo Shatter, and the Selfcraft Mechan. Cryogen Relic is really good. It's just, even without any synergy, it's going to be a 2-for-1. It can stun something, but there's just a ton of synergy in this set. You can sack an artifact for cards worth of value. I mentioned this a lot. So an artifact that's already 2 cards potentially built in is amazing. There's some ways to pounce it. It's an artifact that can end up in your graveyard. There's ways to rebuy it. Definitely just a card that is really appealing to me. Can be a draw to blue. And the Cryo Shatter, pretty weird removal spell, but pretty effective. Basically nullifies a creature in combat for the most part. There's some exceptions, and then there are definitely some creatures you can run into with really annoying abilities, but if the activated ability requires them to tap, at least they can only do it once. But let's say an extreme is you run into an Elegy Acolyte, which is an amazing creature that doesn't have to enter combat at all to be amazing. Blue actually has some ways to tap things. So, not that that's perfect, but in decks with lots of Cryo Shatters, I sometimes pay attention to maybe some other kind of filler blue cards I have that have the ability to tap something, specifically the one with Warp, the 6 mana 5/5. Because that gives
Mechanozoa.
that gives you 2 opportunities to tap something. And that can just be combined with Cryo Shatter to actually answer something that needs to be off the board.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it is a 1 mana removal spell. Would you consider it splashable, or is it not quite?
No, I would consider it splashable.
Okay, cool. I'd bet you'd splash the Relic too, right? I mean,
yeah, I've splashed
pretty
cards.
solid card advantage. Yeah.
The Mechan obviously needs artifacts to sack. So, but I do think that when you meet that criteria, it's a very strong card. Converting a smaller artifact, even one that didn't give you value. There's some 1 mana artifact creatures in the set or things like that, into a card and a counter. That's pretty good.
Makes sense.
As far as uncommons go, it's a lot of so we've got kind of the 2-for-1 category or more. Cerebral Download and Codecracker Hounds, both kind of clunky cards, but just really good things to get value. Both potentially splashable. Through here a little more. We've got Gigastorm Titan is just like the 5 mana 4/4 that can cost 2, but it's really easy to cost 2, and you don't need to be fancy with this. It's just the fact that even on turn 5 you could play a 3-drop and this. There's just a lot of sudden board presence in the game. But sometimes on turn 4, 2-drop in this. I've played Cryo Shatter on this on turn 3, stuff like that.
Boy, some of these names are hard to say. The next one on your list is the Ilvoy.
Yeah, so this is a 3
yeah.
mana 1/3 that when it hits an opponent draws a card, and if you cast 2 or more spells this turn, it can't be blocked. That one, I think in draft that card has been underperforming compared to what I expect, but in sealed it's still kind of the same old. It can become evasive and hit them and draw cards. It's not always going to completely run away with the game, and it's pretty bad in combat when things are going wrong. So it's not broken, but it's pretty serviceable. I was thinking
pretty small.
Yeah.
For 3 mana.
Like if you think about it, like even if you do the thing twice, you've spent 3 mana to deal 2 to your opponent and draw 2 cards. It's not that different from like any other divination at that point, even.
Right. Even though it often feels worse when that happens to you, but
yeah, it feels bad when your opponent hits you with this. But yeah, if they just cast divination, they might have been better off.
Right.
We've got Mechan Assembler and Mouth of the Storm. Right, the Mechan Assembler is one I've splashed if you have good ways to make artifacts. Notably, so it only can trigger once per turn, so it's not like it goes infinite, but it can trigger off artifact tokens, so that's what can make it splashable sometimes. You might have a lot more artifacts than it looks like in your deck that can make bodies off of this, including a consistent way in the landfall enchantment you social engineering. In green, that's when a card that makes me splash Mechan Assembler a lot.
Okay. Mouth of the Storm, you've got next. 7 mana, 6/6 flying, Ward 2.
Yep. When it enters, you kind of get a fog. Also, you potentially get a good attack in. Just pretty big, large flyer. Ward 2 is nice. Hard to be bad. Can be splash worthy. And then Specimen Freighter we've got, which is the spacecraft I already touched on.
Gotcha. Before you get on the bears, I do have a question. I noticed you don't have Star Beach Whale on there. And what do you think of that card? It looks pretty good to me. I also looked at the data, and it doesn't perform particularly well, but I'm curious as to maybe if you know why.
I don't really know why. Honestly, your first impression and then what the data says has kind of been the order. Like, I would play this card all the time when I started this format, and now it's a card I put in my decks, but it's not one that is drawing me to blue.
Okay.
Maybe it's just, I think part of it could certainly be that, like, Surveil 2 on turn 2 in limited or whatever is kind of useless. The warp on this is like a little weak. Like, you just don't know what you need. You're just going to need a lot of lands and spells as the game goes long. So it's just...
It seems like a decent insurance against Mana Screw is like the only way I would look at it.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, it's a little weird. I think you kind of just find better top-end cards than this is probably what's happening.
Okay. All right. Well, I believe you. I certainly can't imagine it's a bad card, but
yeah,
maybe it's not as good as it looks, at least to me.
Yeah, and so rares and mythics, we've got Quantum Riddler, just amazing. Big flyer, draws cards. The one or fewer
Total bomb, yeah. Gotta be one of the best cards in this set, right?
Yeah. Starfield Vocalist. I had a draft where I picked one this card and discovered that there's just a ton of ETBs in the set. It also doubles landfall triggers,
Nice.
things like that. It's really easy. It's just a 4-mana 3/4 is obviously a little bit below what you'd want for a 4-drop, but it's not bad enough. It falls in that same category I was talking about, where a 3/3 is still usually board impacting. Yeah, it's really scary. Even if your deck is not the scariest with it, your opponent is probably going to prioritize killing it if they can, which can be good. You can squeeze it in for extra value. You can just sometimes... I've had my opponent just warp this and play Virus Beetle and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's really good. Considering the fact that it is mainly, does these other things, I think the fact that it's a 4-mana 3/4 is pretty huge.
Yeah. Starwinder. I like Starwinder. Warp 4 for no board presence is kind of hard to pull off. But it's like a 7-mana 7/7 that can have this text later, which is pretty good. And then also warping in a 7/7 is really good with station. So I keep in mind certain spacecrafts when I have this card in my pool, because sometimes you can play this and instantly turn on a spacecraft, hit them with a flying creature, draw a bunch of cards. That play pattern is really powerful.
Oh, wow, yeah. Especially if it's like a flying spacecraft that you could crew just one shot. Holy, yeah. That's nice.
Luckily, the ability is a May. It's really not uncommon when you work with this card that you hit them, you set up a turn for it and you hit them and you draw to maybe 7 or 8 cards total in your hand, and then you don't use it very much the rest of the game.
Right, because you don't want to deck.
Yeah.
Huge chunks of damage.
The fact that you can get a bunch of cards up front with this is great. And then similarly, drawing a bunch of cards, Weft Walking. This is a card that, incentivizes you to get your hands empty or close to empty, but it's a one-sided time twister. And then it gives each player like a first spell they cast each turn is free. But it turns out when you just drew 7 cards, or maybe less because you still had some cards in your hand, that you getting a free spell each turn is going to be a lot more valuable than them getting a free spell each turn, even though they do get the first free spell.
Gotcha. Yeah, this card strikes me as really good, although maybe that's not super intuitive. What the thing you have to realize with it, I think, is that by the time you cast it, that ability for your opponent is probably not even going to be very good.
Exactly.
Because they're not getting the draw 7.
Exactly. I would say that having this line of text is an upside, if compared to a downside. That's the simplest way to put it. Yeah. It's not a major upside, but it is better this way. So yeah, blue comes up sometimes. I will say red and green are certainly the colors I've been in the most, and maybe black after that.
Blue does look like it's kind of got some trinkety synergy things going on, which isn't going to come together as much in sealed, I would say.
I agree. It has some good splash cards, though. It's a color I've splashed a lot of cards in.
Early on, I know you really liked black, which is the next color we could talk about. What do you think about it now?
It's still a color I often find ends up performing as a good enough base color. But yeah, I guess I'll mention this now. I had a lot of just straight red-green or red-green splash decks this weekend, even though none of them are what I won boxes with. But also, a lot of them I netted gems with. So I think a lot of pools in this format are just going to be red-green or red-green splash due to the nature of these lander cards, which we'll get to at the end. But also just have like solid curves. It's a pretty aggressive color. It follows a lot of the rules that I'm mentioning, where it gives you fixing, it gives you a good curve. So that's probably why. But yeah, there's certainly some really strong things going on here in other colors. So, you just have to pay attention and see what you have. But yeah, red-green is usually, I think, what most pools will be in this format. That's not the right way of putting it. It's not like over half of pools will be red-green. But if I have to pick any color combination to be the biggest representation, it's going to be red-green by a good amount.
Yeah, presumably that's just because of the landers, since there's no other real fixing elsewhere.
Yeah.
So it's the only real way to play lots of colors, unless you open the dual lands that are in the special slot or whatever.
All right, so at black, we've got some value creatures in Beamsaw, Prospector, Gravpack, Monoist, and Virus Beetle. I'm going to clump these together. These are all creatures that when they enter or die give you some value. They're some pretty small bodies, but they're serviceable and they play really well with Black's theme. They all kind of work with sacking creatures, sacking artifacts. And we've got Gravkill, which is just a solid removal spell. Totally splashable too. Yeah, nothing spectacular, but Black kind of enters this synergistic thing. At uncommon, we've got Blade of the Swarm. I find there's just a lot of warp across all the colors, so the fact that this sometimes can get one of those warp creatures shuffled in from your opponent can make it pretty close to a 2-for-1, especially because a lot of the warp abilities aren't like a full thing's worth of value on the front half. But also a 4-mana 5/3 is fine, so you're never sad about drawing that card. Dubious Delicacy is kind of in the same category as those black commons, where it's just like a 3-mana removal spell. But it gives you something in play to sack later, or, you know, the modal option of gaining 3 life or dealing 3 damage can matter a lot in a game.
There's a lot of void in black.
Yeah.
So having things to turn that on any given turn is very useful.
Yep. Faller's Faithful. This is, I think, just one of the best cards, one of the best uncommons in the set.
Oh, interesting.
Card I splash for a lot. So it's 2 in the black for a 3/1. When it enters, you destroy up to 1 of the target creature. If that creature wasn't dealt damage this turn, its controller draws 2 cards. So I view this card mostly as sack another creature, draw 2 cards. That's the baseline of what you're trying to do with this. You're trying to find, ideally, things that give you value when they die, or you played Virus Beetle on turn 2, and you get 2 cards out of them. But, you know, 2 cards is also up, you know, we talked about, you know, the 1-mana 4/1 Defender. If you killed that with this, you still traded your 2 cards for a 3/1 and 2 cards. So you're still like up a card, even if the thing you kill of your own doesn't have any value associated with it. If it was cheaper, the better. But it's modal. This card, you know, in an emergency can kill something or do the damage mode. You could decide to attack into something large first, let them block, then kill it if you think that's better than letting them draw 2 cards. If you don't have the option, you can let them draw 2 cards. That's not amazing. When you're losing, you might still end up, you know, being further behind or similarly behind. But the mode I most often like choose if I'm picking my opponent's creature to kill is because it's lethal, or they're just so far behind on board that, you know, you kill their 1 blocker and you attack them with everything and they're like 2 life. Who cares if they draw 2 cards? You have, you know, 4 lethal attackers or some situation like that.
Right.
Just super modal.
And you could definitely win a game where your opponent plays some crazy rare and kill it, and they get 2 cards, sure, but they would have gotten way more.
Exactly.
And you could beat the 2 cards, but you can't beat whatever the bomb was.
But yeah, definitely look for cheap creatures, exploitable creatures alongside this, because the main mode is to target your own things with this.
Yeah, that makes sense. We haven't really seen a card like this. They've sort of toyed with this effect. I don't even really know why. It's not that interesting every set, but this one they finally has made a cool card, I think.
Yeah, you know, it was in one of the Innistrad, Crimson Vow, or maybe the other one. There was like a 3-mana 1/3 Death Touch, which with exploit, and when it exploited a creature, you drew 2 cards and lost 2 life. That card was amazing. Obviously a 1/3 Death Touch. It's a little bit higher impact than a 3/1, but this one being modal, I kind of like this one more.
Nice.
Fell Graveship I already talked about, but also I've splashed this card. I just think it's really good. I do seriously think it matters. It's cheap. It turns into a lifelinker. All this really adds up. It's just a lot of good things going on. Hymn of the Faller is just a card draw spell. It's not like exceptional, but, you know, in sealed you really want to look for these things that are like 2-for-1s or stuff like that. Don't be too greedy with it. If you need to just draw 1 card, then you can just cycle it for the 1 card and surveil. But, you know, if you're able to...
I mean, that's most of the value is the surveil and then draw 1 anyways.
Yeah, cards like this, they play out where it's like, as long as you can continue doing other things, you just won't play this. But as soon as you kind of have no other options but to play this, you really have to assess, like, maybe I should just cycle this.
Yeah, for sure.
Mono Circuit Feeder, giant kind of Necrotal type creature, can get in a great attack. Also really good with spacecrafts. Because spacecrafts are artifacts that are sitting in play, and if you can target one of your creatures, then you can, you know, that creature will get a lot of power. But this card can also target itself. You do need each player to control a creature in order to put this ability on the stack. But if all you had in play was a single spacecraft, you could still play this and try to kill your opponent's 2 toughness creature, and this thing becomes a 6/4, and it can put 6 counters on a station.
Nice.
But obviously it can scale into something completely absurd and kill your opponent's 5/5 and make your Virus Beetle into a 6/5 that turn and attack, and just things like that, you know?
Mm-hmm. The one you have on here, so you've got Tragic Trajectory. That's pretty obvious why that's good, yep. I guess. The Void Forged Titan. Sometimes it's hard to tell with like expensive 5-drop creatures if they're filler or if they're really good. At least I have a hard time telling sometimes.
I agree. Yeah, this one, not absurd, but I think it's not always suspicious when you just, if you're going to your turn 5 and you attack that offers a trade, that's not that suspicious. And that card's really good in those spots. And then, if you get the card immediately the turn you play this, and then it's threatening that anytime you play a removal spell or another creature trades, it's going to give you more cards. That's pretty powerful.
I've had a chance to play with, I drafted a black-red deck, and then in Sealed I played, I think the deck I won a collector's box with was also black-red.
Yep.
And while you do have to build around it a bit, there are the tools to trigger Void when you need it. It's not like things of this in the past. I remember what's the effect with Tragic Slip? Morbid.
Yeah.
Morbid cards usually play pretty badly.
Yeah.
But given that they've added this, I think what does it really is the warp.
I agree.
They've added the warp thing to it. Makes it a lot better.
Yeah, keep that in mind for sure. And I guess I'll say too, a lot of, cards that aren't making the list in black, I think they're better than a lot of the cards that didn't make the list in white.
Okay.
There's just some better kind of filler.
Yeah, so if you had to, you think white is at the bottom of the rankings then?
I do. For Sealed, definitely.
For Sealed, okay. And then red and green at the top, and then black and blue kind of in the middle there?
Yeah, black's probably third.
Okay.
Part of that might be because
sense.
I think I have some of the rares are really good. I guess Elegy Acolyte, I think, is one of the best rares in the whole set.
That makes total sense. Yeah, I had that guy.
Yeah.
He's nasty.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I lost the pool, or lost the Arena Direct run I had when I had that guy, but he's a nasty boy.
Yeah. The combo of both those abilities plays really well together because you can attack and offer a trade, and your opponent has a lose-lose situation. If they trade, you'll just get a 2/2 end of turn. If they let you hit them, you'll draw a card and lose a life. You can start attacking with multiple things into one big blocker and be totally happy about it. It's also just a 4/4 lifelink itself, pretty big.
Yeah.
Just an amazing card, yeah. Other black cards that are really good, I've got Requiem Monolith. This one's kind of interesting. It's kind of like a Phyrexian Arena, but you need to have a creature in play, and preferably a creature with 2 or more toughness, which actually a lot of the black commons I mentioned have 1 toughness, so that's pretty awkward. So you definitely might want to look at other colors. This card might be more splashable because green things don't really have 1 toughness. There's also
have you played with this one?
Yeah, I've had it in the deck. I have not got to do the combo-y type stuff with it, but yeah, I mean, having
Sure,
the option,
but just using its ability.
Yeah, you just use its ability to draw a card and lose a life, ideally. There's some red burn spells you could pair with to either use on your own creature or potentially your opponent's creature. The really kind of card that you might be more drawn to play if you have this card is the Pinnacle Starship, that does 10, because 10 damage can be very lethal, pretty easily lethal.
Yeah,
especially if you're killing their blocker at the same time.
Yeah, it's funny. This card, I saw it in play, and my opponent lost really badly because I had an aggressive draw, and it didn't help him. But
right,
it's a weird card, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I like it. Might be better in a green deck, honestly, on a splash. But yeah. So Thera the Super Void, I've only played against once, and I've heard some weird things about it, but I found it a nightmare to play against. It was like I played it.
Seems like a nightmare.
When my opponent played it when like they had 2 creatures and I had 1 creature, but my 1 creature was like kind of just evenly statted with one of theirs, and it was like, what am I gonna do? Like if I play more creatures to the board, this is only gonna get worse for me. And like they just wouldn't. They just weren't like letting me trade off my creature, and developing more to the board. And then like eventually that creature died, and they got it too with 2 counters. Like. Or I could have played more creatures and they would have gotten more value if something traded. It seemed kind of really difficult to play against.
It's definitely a card that both has a really high ceiling and a decently low floor. So I can see why maybe some people have had bad experiences with it. But I have to imagine it's pretty good on average. You can maneuver the game some way to get really good value out of it.
And black has all this sacrifice stuff, so they can combo with it to some extent.
Right. Sunset Saboteur.
Yeah,
on your
so
list.
this is just a
You
little
like that guy?
2-drop. Kind of weird, but it can just kind of run away with the game. As things trade off, it gets in 4 damage.
So you don't think the downside of having to put a creature on your, or a +1/+1 counter on your opponent creatures is enough to dissuade you?
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. I mean, also, like, it can block and trade with a bigger creature on some boards, and it's hard for them to prevent you from doing that because of the ward.
Right. Okay.
And
I have to imagine this is one of the cards that is like less splashable, even though it's really good in
I
a black
agree.
deck.
And then like the upside for sure of the card is that like sometimes you play this on turn 2 and your opponent doesn't play a creature, right? And they're just already taking 4 and it has no downside yet.
Right, and then they're probably going to take 4 the next 3 turns too because it has menace.
Exactly. It's just a card that can really easily deal a lot of damage really fast turn 2 on the play. That's why you play it, but it's kind of just serviceable throughout the whole game, I think.
Gotcha. And then the last card I see here in black is the Black Sweeper 0-point Ballad. This one is the X spell where you have to pay life for X.
Yeah, so paying life's pretty annoying. I think, the 6 or more and you return something that was destroyed this way, that's pretty powerful. But also what could be really powerful about this card is setting it up to destroy a lot of your opponent's small creatures and not your creatures that are slightly larger. So I guess once again, maybe more of a card that pairs well with green or could even easily be splashed in a green deck.
Right, that makes sense.
It's actually
even just a slower deck in general that's going to have bigger creatures, but the green too, obviously, totally.
Yeah, like the 7 or more, like the spots where you pay 7 mana on this and get something back, I think are actually less interesting to me than the spots where either you keep something and a lot of their things die, or your opponent just goes like 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, and their 4-drop had 3 toughness, and you say, okay, those are all dead, and just stuff like that. Or even just you could kill a 2-drop and a 3-drop or things like that.
Gotcha. Yeah, it definitely seems like a good card. Yeah. Let's see. Got red. Red's got tons of removal, huh?
Yeah, so I have a lot of commons. I'll point out right now. So I put Plasma Bolt on this list, which does 2 damage. Void does 3 damage, and I did not put the black common removal spell, Depressurize. I think Depressurize is playable, but it's not a big draw to me. Eventually, it starts missing on things. Plasma Bolt also starts missing on things. The difference is sometimes I win the game with Plasma Bolt because it goes face, and that's not meaningless to me.
Definitely not. I agree.
It's just like, and it costs 1 less mana, even though it's a sorcery. Mm-hmm. I just think it's significantly better than Depressurize.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there? I mean, there's one thing about this format is there's actually a lot of removal. Maybe not a lot of premium removal, but there's a lot of removal in the colors. Does that, because all the colors have so much removal, do you find yourself looking to play removal like less, or is that a smaller draw?
Well, no. I mean, in sealed, what ends up happening a lot for me actually is especially with green. Well, green actually has a fair amount of removal, but sometimes I'll just see that one of my colors has a really strong curve or good rares, but maybe is lacking removal, and then the color I pair it with is just whatever I can get the most removal out of.
Gotcha. Maybe the better question is there a limit to how much removal you'll play, I guess?
Yeah.
Since there's so much?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you want to make sure you have a good amount of creatures in your decks. I typically, not that I have hard rules, but 14 is kind of what I'm aiming for. They have different categories because there is some, sort of, especially larger creatures, those are pretty valuable, which is why green ends up, I think, in sealed generally sees a lot of play, both because of fixing and just having large bodies. If your opponent starts playing some cheap 2/2s to start the game and you just play a 3/3, that is sort of removal in its own sense. A lot of games.
Yeah, and some decks, they'll only have 9 creatures or 10, but each creature's a banger. Like, they're not the little dorky things. Like, they're actually, they could all close on their own type of thing.
Counting your creatures is arbitrary because some creatures are just like Virus Beetle and like whatever. Like,
yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, so then more stuff in red. So we mentioned the pair of Kav Landseeker and Orbital Plunge. These do different things, but they're both 4 mana commons that impact the board and give you a lander. And like I mentioned, I do really kind of believe in this play pattern where I'm kind of avoiding 5-drops a little bit more when I have these cards in my deck and looking more towards maybe having 2 or 3 like 7 mana cards in my deck. But I'm trying to sacrifice still a high point in my curve, not just completely raise my curve.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. I mean, in general, the more you're going to need ramp or card draw to play lots of expensive cards, and then even then you don't want too many.
Yeah, I guess
these sorts of Lancer cards let you play 7-drops, and there's some pretty good 7-drops in each color, oddly enough, even at common.
Yeah, I didn't put it on my list, but I like Nebula Dragon. It doesn't draw me to red,
I was wondering.
But that's the type of thing that I want to pair with these cards, I guess. If I already have these Lander cards, then I'm looking for Nebula Dragon.
Yeah, that makes sense. I bet a lot of the time that card just goes face, huh?
It does, yeah. That's part of why that probably matters with me liking Plasma Bolt too. I probably just burns my opponents for a fair amount of damage in some of these games.
Yeah, I bet Nebula Dragon would be a lot worse if we could only hit creatures.
Yeah. We've got the Oreplate Pangolin. I just think is a really solid 2-drop because it can scale throughout the game. Getting counters is a big deal. Bombard's just a removal spell, pretty obvious. Did I put Rust Harvester under the commons? Whoops. I think I meant to put...
Is that the rare 1-drop?
Yeah, that's the rare 1-drop. So I wonder what I put. But...
Rush, Rust Harvester. Yeah, no big deal. We're going to have a graphic up on the YouTube channel, guys. You could watch.
Yeah.
You could see the graphic for all of this stuff.
Zookeeper McCann's also a really good, common 2-drop. So, I'm mentioning just that I'm playing these red-green aggro decks a lot, and, I'm mentioning these cheap common creatures that I actually really like that draw me to these colors. You can kind of see why maybe I end up in red and or green a lot.
Zookeeper Mechan seems nice.
Yeah.
2-mana 1/3 ramp creatures are typically really good, and you usually only find them in green.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been a new development with Dragonstorm. It makes sense that, you see all these red rituals they've made for years. Making mana is certainly a red thing, and a mana dork in a sense is like casting a little ritual.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think it fits.
Yeah. Only making red mana, not making any color. But.
Agreed, yeah.
And the Slag Drill Scrapper is the 1-mana 1/2 that you can pay 2 and sack an artifact or land to draw a card. This can cash in your landers pretty well, or just some weird value plays otherwise, or even when you get flooded, start sacking lands.
Oh, I haven't even been looking at this card. I'm surprised you like it. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think having these types of effects in Sealed, but also,
just like one in your deck?
1 or 2. They're just pretty good. I mean, if you draw 2, you'll sack 1 to the other.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I'll have to give it a try.
Yeah.
It certainly doesn't look good to me, but, I'm curious what the data on that is. I'll look it up while you keep talking about what we're doing.
I bet it's good.
Okay.
Usually, these cards end up performing
nice.
well. When you can put 1-drops, because, also when you play this on turn 1, it might deal a little bit of damage, but it's not, like, an embarrassing card in the long game.
So it basically performs dead average.
Okay, fair enough.
But that's better than I would have expected.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, uncommon, more removal, cut propulsion, just another instant speed, close to murder.
Yep.
Galvanizing Saw Ship is the another. It's a 6/5 flying haste station, but it only has a crew of 3, so really easy to play this and attack with immediately. And I mean, just when it works, a 6/5 flying haste is just Rorik's Bladewing, and it's going to end the game really quickly, if not immediately lethal in your games.
Right, and the crew is so small that you could play this and just crew it to block with, too.
Yeah, that too. You don't have to give up, like, a bad turn if you're behind. You could just develop this and block, exactly.
Yeah.
Invasive Maneuvers is another removal spell. Litho Breaking is a little sweeper, but that, kind of for the same reason I like 0 Point Valid. I just think sometimes it's really high upside, and you just kill your opponents like 2-drop and 3-drop or even better, and before the game really starts. And
it's nice, I was looking through these creatures. A lot of the red creatures have more than 2 toughness.
Yeah, you need an extra mana, but you can set this up correctly with the Oreplate Pangolin the way it works too. You can you create a land, or you sack the 2/2 that whenever an artifact enters, you can pay 1 to give it a counter.
Okay.
When you play Litho Breaking, it creates a trigger after you sack the artifact because it says when you do. So you get to stack that when you do with pay 1 and put a counter on this because you created a land.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, if you have like the 2-mana 1/3, it's pretty good with that.
Yeah. And then we talked about Artifact Intimidator. That one certainly, that catches my eyes because I'm looking to be an aggressive deck. I'm looking for powerful cards, and that's just, it's really in that category.
Gotcha. And then rares, you only have a couple for red, although I have to imagine Nova Hellkite is
definitely one of the stronger ones.
One of the best cards.
Giant Flying Haste thing. My pre-release, I had 2 of them. Just the Warp obviously enables it to maybe kill a 1 toughness creature early in the game, but also getting in 4 damage is not irrelevant. The Warp also is just not irrelevant that maybe even on your turn 5, if you don't have any good plans for turn 6, but you have like a 2-drop in your hand, you can play a 2-drop and warp this, still get in your 4 damage like you played it, and then next turn just play it anyways.
Right, or trigger the Void, or dodge Sorcery Speed removal if you have nothing going on.
Yeah, and it's just a lot of damage really fast. Possibility Technician, really good card. There's even a lot of Kabus in the set. But I think what happens more is not that you get the or another Kavu enters part. It's just the fact that like you warp this on turn 2 and you play it on turn 3 and you've got your 2 cards in exile some games, and if they don't kill it immediately, you'll probably get those 2 cards, and even if they do, you still can get those cards later. And your opponent feeling like they have to immediately kill your 3-drop is also pretty good for you.
Nice. Yeah, I had this card in I had 1 Nova Hellkite and 1 possibility Tactician in my red-black deck that I got a collector box with, and they're both very good.
Yeah, and the gunship we talked about. And this isn't to say the other rares are bad, just, these are the ones that I'm like, I really want to try to play these or splash these if I can, if they're single pipped.
Yeah, of course. What about, let's see, are we on to the, oh no, we still got to do green.
Yep. Yeah, I know, it's a lot of cards always.
It's a lot to cover, yeah.
Yeah. So green, we've got the Diplomatic Relations, which is the card that's errata, but still a really solid removal spell. We've got the Galactic Wayfarer, which I've mentioned a few times now, which is a good value card. 3 mana, 3/3, get a lander is just going to be good no matter what you do with that lander, but it also kind of helps with fixing, helps with landfall triggers, just really good. Gene Pollinator, that one is more specifically fixing, but this is a card I know, it sounds like I've been hearing it has really good stats on 17 lands, actually.
I know it does for draft. I haven't looked at it for sealed.
Gotcha.
Which could be different. Let me look right now while you continue your thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really solid role player. What I would want to say is, you want to care about the ability to tap your stuff. You want to care about fixing with this. I don't just always play it, and it's also a card that I really think you get punished for playing a lot of copies of. But also, you can sack it. It's an artifact. So I think that's also where it comes into play with having good win rate is, like, once you're done with it, you can find a way to rid yourself of it for value.
Yeah, it's at 56.2.
Okay.
Forgive me if you just said this because I was looking it up, but I don't think you did. One of the things I've liked about this is the synergy with the creatures that enjoy having 2 permanents tapped.
Yeah.
Or 2 creatures tapped at the end of the turn, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's all pretty good.
And then Blooming Stingers on this list, just mostly just a 2/2 Death Touch, but sometimes that ETB trigger matters. It actually, for me, it's mattered more with bigger creatures, where like if you have a 5/5 and your opponent has like a 3/3 and a 4/4, giving your 5/5 Death Touch means it's probably just going to deal 5 damage. Because they're not going to double block. And then you have a 2/2 Death Touch on defense. In general, I like these kind of cheaper Death Touch creatures in Magic in general. They just end up blocking well. 2 power also means it can just attack and still curve out nicely for you. At uncommon, we've got the Broodguard Elite, which is the guy that gets counters, and when he leaves, he puts the counters on a creature you control with Warp. Just a lot of stats in one card. Notably, it's like easy to think, I guess for me, it was easy to forget that when you cast the green X like card after you warp this card, that it still has this ability that when it leaves, you move its counters. So
yeah, that's pretty nice. That's pretty sticky.
Yeah. So as long as you have a lot of creatures in play, it's really hard for your opponent to mess with this. It's not when it dies either. It's when it leaves. We've got Close Encounter, which is another removal spell, but it acts pretty uniquely from a lot of other ones because you can, when you cast it, as an additional cost, you're choosing one of your creatures or a warped creature you control, and it does damage equal to the power of what you choose. So there's a few key things about this. It cannot really be interacted with. Like if they kill your creature in response, that does not matter. It does if it's depressurized. If they change the creature's power in response, that would matter. But not if they kill it. And it also does not work with Death Touch or Lifelink like these cards typically do. The Close Encounter is dealing the damage itself.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on because almost all those cards work like that.
Yeah.
So it's something. If your brain's like mine and you're doing shortcuts and whatnot, you might get screwed over.
Yep. Use Social Engineering, one of my favorite cards in the set. Really, really good in my opinion. Kind of funny when we've had Chocobo Racetrack in the last set, and that card did not seem that good.
Yeah, when I saw that, so I actually kind of liked Chocobo Racetrack. I thought it was not a great card, but yeah. I think there were some good situations for it. So when I saw this, having the warp is like a huge benefit to this card because it's essentially just baseline as a 2/2, and then it has this late game value.
Yeah, you get to like
more like a 3 mana 2/2, but
yeah, well, it's like it's an extra mana before it works as a 2/2. But if you have like another play that turn with the mana, that works. It also, on turn 4, specifically if you played Galactic Wayfarer on turn 3, for example, you can play this, play your land, and crack your lander and give 2/2/2.
Spicy. Yeah.
And the fact I think that there just are landers in the set makes the enchantment 5 mana mode of this so much more powerful than the Racetrack felt in in Final Fantasy. That might
Final
also because
Fantasy,
I feel like there's more removal, so the games are more about attrition, and this card is just an endless stream of bodies pretty much throughout your game. So yeah, this is really high on my list of cards I see in my pool that I'm like, I want to play green because I want to play my Use Social Engineering. In fact, that deck I talked about that was Esper, which I think I got 5 wins with. They were like, I built my Esper deck and then ended up being Green Splash Esper. That's because I had 2 Use Social Engineerings. It's like, I just wanted to play them and all those white, blue.
No, that's a really good card.
Yeah.
It's funny. I'm looking at this list now. There's a lot of really good green uncommon, so it makes sense that green's one of your favorite colors.
Yeah, Glacial
This
Godmaw.
next one's kind of like a mythic. Yeah.
Yeah, giant top end thing. Ideally, you play this and then play a land. It gives itself vigilance and haste, but don't get greedy with it. If you have nothing else to play, you can play this. You know, it'll attack next turn, and you can crack the lander. Just
It might kill them by itself.
yeah, but yeah, really a card that can swing it. The Grove Strider, giant ward creature, just amazing. You know, pretty vanilla, but Ward 2 is a big deal when you're just talking about stats, and it's harder to kill because it has so much toughness once you get into the late game. And it's like a 7/7, and it's like out of orbital plunge range, just things like that. Got next, Larval Scout Lander. That's the spacecraft I talked about. Pretty good for fixing, pretty good for landfall. Just pretty happy with it all around. Meltstrider's Resolve is another removal spell in green. Green seems like it has a little bit more removal than it typically does.
I think it has like four fight spells. They usually only get 2.
Yeah. So this is a fight spell, but it's an aura that also gives the creature +0/+2 and can't be blocked by more than one creature. You know, Prey Upon has not aged well over the years, but giving your creature an extra 2 toughness before it fights means it's going to probably, you know, if you both played your creatures on similar spots on the curve, you're probably going to win that fight. One of my favorite cards to put this on is the Cav Landseeker in reds, because if it has this, it can't be blocked at all. It's just a 4-power unblockable creature the rest of the game.
Can't be blocked by more than one creature or
it has to be blocked by 2 or more. Yeah.
Yep.
And then we got these Seed Ship cards. The Agrarian, pretty good value card. This is a card that plays really well with the Pollinator because you can tap it the turn you play it to get a lander immediately for some value. Also, just scales really big. It has the landfall get a counter, pretty huge. And then Seed Ship Impact. I love this card.
Do you just main deck it?
Oh yeah, I main deck it. I've main decked 2 and not felt like they're weak. You know, we talked about this, I think, in our top 10 list, even, that it's not like you have to target something that costs 2 or less. And this set has plenty of artifacts and then some enchantments. So, you know, you can just trade up on mana a lot by playing Naturalizing your main deck, but, you know, you just kill their 1/1 Death Touch artifact creature or their Gene Pollinator with this, and you're just super happy to get the 2-for-1 and the early lander, too.
Yeah, totally. You could just set it up on a turn where you ramp that same turn if you really want a ramp spell, too. Yep. Seems great.
Yeah, so I don't save this. If my opponent plays a cheap artifact or enchantment, I will just fire this off.
Makes sense.
Get my lander, but it's also, like I said, it's hard for these types of cards to be dead in a longer game, like Sealed. It's the same point. It's not on my list, but I'll main deck Shattered Wings less often if I have a Seed Ship Impact, to be honest. But still, the destroy an artifact, enchantment, or creature flying, it's hard to miss.
Right. This one is 1 more mana and it's sorcery, so I could see why you don't like it as much.
Yeah, and it can't be a 2-for-1 like this card. Because, I mean, getting a lander token on turn 2 is like one of the... You're just going to have more opportunities to squeak it in.
It's insane.
Get your land.
Yeah, lander tokens in general are really nice. It's basically adding an instant speed rampant growth to your hand.
Yeah, exactly. Famished Worldsire, I haven't had the opportunity to play with this card, but it's played against me sometimes. It roughly seems like a 20 power plus Ward 3 that puts the rest of your lands in your deck into play when you cast it. So
yeah, seems really good. It doesn't
lethal.
Quite seem like maybe one of the maybe it looks insane, and it's probably not that insane because at the end of the day it's 8 mana, triple green, and just a vanilla. But I do agree. It is.
But
good.
There's a little bit more to that, right? Because you look at if you play this on turn 8 with 8 mana, you're gonna look at your top 24 cards and put all the lands into play tapped. So
you just get all the land out of your deck.
You're not gonna draw lands the rest of the game, and it's a 24/24 Ward 3. I mean, it my opponent played it and I killed it immediately, but then they didn't draw lands the rest of the game. Like it's like. That's
All
pretty
right.
unique.
Yeah, pretty ridiculous card.
Yeah, and imagine if you had the engineering in play and you just got a bunch of tutus,
Yeah.
stuff like
Yeah.
that.
I will still stand by the fact that 8 mana cards are,
You have to care about that you have them in your deck when you have to have the landers or things like that. I agree with that.
yeah.
You don't just get to 8 mana in a normal game of Sealed that often without something helping you.
Yeah.
Ouroboros. I mean, this card just goes out of control really fast.
Yeah.
I have faced this card so many times and had an answer right away. They still get a counter on all their guys, but not, I guess, right away, not an instant speed, but on my own turn. Luckily, one of the answers that works on this card actually is Cryo Shatter, because giving it -5 power means it won't put counters on their things anymore. But obviously, you're hoping the whole game that they can't remove that aura.
Right.
Otherwise, you'll be in big trouble. But, yeah, that's
This
nice
is like
that
those. This is like those shit posts you see on Facebook where it's like, would you take $10 million or would you take a penny one day, 2 pennies the next day,
Yeah.
4 pennies the next day for a month? And it's like, oh yeah, I'll start with the penny, please, thank you.
I mean, you only need the second turn with this card.
I've seen Ouroboros in play, for 3 turns, and I was so dead.
Yeah, and they don't need other creatures. You just have to kill this on site.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely absurd. Okay, so
Finally on to multicolored, huh?
yeah, so got some.
How do you approach multicolored cards?
Sometimes they're splashable. Sometimes they draw me into maybe playing that color combo for sure. It's kind of a mix. Something I pay attention to. This matters more for. Doesn't actually matter at all for sealed. It matters for draft, I guess. Sometimes in some of these sets, especially ones with like multiple multicolored cards, which this set I think there's only basically one uncommon and one rare for each color combo, with maybe some exceptions. But in sets where sometimes they've had like 2 uncommons, and particularly when there's 2 uncommons, sometimes like those 2 uncommons are like the best ones out of like the whole double cycle. Like sometimes they'll just be like, oh, like both the red blue uncommons are the rank 1 and 2 like gold uncommons, and that just means that like it makes those cards in draft, those archetypes in draft, way better, because the gold cards are the cards that like get passed around in pack 3 a lot or stuff like that,
Right. It was a big reason I think blue-red was so good in Final Fantasy.
Yeah, exactly.
Its gold cards were so good.
So it matters a little. It doesn't matter at all in seals because you're just going to get what you open. Yeah, it does matter a little. So we've got the ones I like in uncommon. We got the Station Monitor, not really splashable, but just really solid. We've got Interceptor McCann. That's the black-red one. Is splashable. That's the one that I was mixing up with earlier, because this can target any artifact in your graveyard. So sometimes it works with like the Cryogen Relic, for example. Just a lot of value.
Gotcha.
The Void matters on this card. A 2/2 flyer that slowly grows becomes really threatening in its own.
Gravedigger ++.
Yeah, really good. Nook, 3 mana 2/4, a bit more, like ideally not splashed, but can be splashed, because both these colors are offering you the landers potentially, and that's kind of what you want to pair it with. Lander tokens, and you play this and you play a land and you crack a lander and you get a card. One unique thing I've had with this too is the Vocalist I mentioned before. If you have these 2 cards, and every land you play just does 2 damage and draws a card, because it'll double that trigger. Momenon, the blue-red 1/3. Just that one, not really as splashable, and you do want to care about the artifacts, but it can get out of control if you can get a lot of artifacts entering with this.
Yeah, the counter goes on any creature, which I sort of missed when I read it.
Yeah.
It was just a big deal.
Yeah. The Brood Tender, honestly, the reanimation
my
is like,
favorite.
Like, usually you don't do something absurd with this, but, like, it's a 2 mana 2/3 that offers some value and can scale. 2 mana 2/3 is great on the curve, and then later in the game it can transform into something bigger. Even if you just only return like a 4-drop or something with this, you're still happy that you did that. But then
Makes sense. Doesn't seem, quite as high impact as it could be in Constructed, but I mean, the fact that, like you said, it's 2 mana 2/3 is just solid.
Yeah, and then the Biomechan Engineer is amazing. That's the green-blue 2-drop. Makes a lander, pay 8, draw 2, get a robot. Both a good card that gives you some fixing, but also I'd splash for this. I have. Obviously,
I mean, 2 mana creature that makes a lander, especially if those are your 2 main colors, is kind of insane.
Yeah, but also,
I imagine the Biomechan Engineer is in the same vein.
Yeah. Rares, we have. So Space-Time Anomaly this is more theory to me. I have lost to it, and I had a deck where I was gonna play it, and I was figuring out how to play it. I think I was like looking at either playing black, white, splash blue or black, blue, splash white to play this card, and then I like looked at my red, green, and I was like, oh, I'm playing red, green. and you know, sometimes this mills 20 cards, which is enough to be lethal in a lot of games of limited. And it pairs really well with Radiant Strike, the removal spell that gains 3 life, because both killing their creature and gaining life means you'll probably be in a higher life total game. If you're playing best of 3 and you're against an aggro deck, you should probably board this out, especially on the draw or stuff like that. But yeah, this card, it's just a lot. It's something to keep an eye out when you're like building your deck.
Strikes me as a really good card in like a best of 3. I don't know if I'd main deck it. It seems a little scary.
I guess I've lost to it twice in these arena runs over the weekends, so I just want to give it some respect, because Singularity Rupture, for example, my next card is, you know, a sweeper that
that mill them really good.
Half their library. Yeah, but like the game still has to go on a while for them to get decked. This is nice because it's a sweeper that like probably will help the game go on a long while for them to get decked. But like this doesn't mill 20 cards, right? This is gonna mill like 12 cards, and they're gonna be at 12 cards left.
Right, and it never kills them.
When the other card mills 20 cards, they have 4 cards left, and if they're not close to lethaling you, then the game's over. Like,
yeah, I guess just, you know, in any game that's normal where your opponent has a assertive draw or they curve out, the Rupture is just infinitely better.
Yeah, definitely. Mutinous Massacre, obviously, kind of one of the top bombs in the set. Do keep it in mind if you're playing against a black-red deck that it exists, and there is some weird things you could do to consider playing around a little bit more. You can really only play around it if you're winning. You know, like, okay, like try to keep them from getting your whole board destroyed, because as they fall further behind, if your life total is high, then they're pretty much just trying to do this to destroy everything, and they'll maybe deal a little bit of damage to you, but that won't matter. Obviously, in a giant board stall, this always wins the game. If you haven't played with or been on the receiving end of this card, because I was fortunate enough to play with it before I played against it, but it wasn't intuitive to me that no matter what you pick on this, the end result is that some creatures will die and the rest of the creatures in play will be under your control with haste.
Yeah,
it's not like it misses on anything.
Like, I was gonna say, it sounds pretty hard to even play around this, even if you're kind of ahead.
I mostly mean I've been on the receiving end of like my opponent having 2 creatures and me having none, or they have 3 creatures and I like suspiciously kill like their odd costed creature, and then their heads up enough to stop playing creatures, you know?
Yeah.
Just stuff like that.
Okay.
But yeah, if you're on a board stall, this says win the game. It just does 20
card.
damage most of the time, and they have no blocks. Like, it's...
Yeah. Okay.
Biotech Specialist, honestly, like, this card's probably worse than the green-blue uncommon, but it's still a 2-drop that can make the lander, but I probably wouldn't splash for it. But probably only on my list, really, because I think red-green is going to be often a color combo you play in Sealed. So...
Gotcha.
This is a great 2-drop that does some damage. You know, burning matters.
I thought we already... It's funny, I referenced this card. I thought we already talked about it. I wonder what card you were actually talking about when I said something about it. Oh, well. That's okay.
Yeah, Diadrine, giant green-white card, really easily splashable. This is the type of card I'm talking about, where you just put 1 plains in your deck. That makes your green-red deck with a bunch of landers. You put 1 plains in your deck, and you put this guy in your deck.
I have to say, in my green-white draft deck that I drafted this format, I had this and Terra Symbiosis.
Nice.
And I against my opponent, I played turn 3 Terra Symbiosis, turn 4 this, and limited, and it was...
This guy's also
insane as it sounds.
Just up the curve, ahead on stats, no matter how much mana you put into him. I had a game that I won where I curved out, and I played this as my 2-drop on turn 2, because I just had my 3-drop and 4-drop lined up, and I said I want a 2-mana 2/3, and
especially in green white, you can still get value out of the ability.
Yeah, it still has the counters even if you pay 0.
Mm-hmm. Nice card.
Sire Vondam, the 2/2 Vigilance Menace that grows. Notably, when a creature you control dies or is put into exile, so that means if you warp at your end step, he'll get a counter, and you gain a life. So that's oftentimes how I've been growing this card. Black-white seems like it actually has more warp cards than other color combos. I'm not sure if that's true, but that's how it's felt. Maybe just because I noticed this guy more often. And once you get him to 4/4, he's really annoying. 4/4 Vigilance Menace, and if they ever kill it, you get to destroy something or exile it.
This is one of those cards where it's basically just all upside. Like, nothing can go wrong. And I think that matters a lot.
Yeah, like, you play this on turn 2, it's also just Vigilance Menace, so it's going to get in damage a lot. if you get like the first, even if you don't get it to 4/4, then 3/3 Vigilance Menace is also just like really annoying for them. It's going to get in a lot of damage.
Yeah, and even if your opponent kills it, it's only 2 mana, so it's like impossible for them to get an advantage by killing it. Not impossible, but it's hard.
Yeah. Pinnacle Emissary, you have to have the artifact spells. It's a 3 mana 3/3, and you can warp it. It's kind of a card I think you don't warp that much, but sometimes you do.
Mm-hmm.
It's warp.
Notably, the drones can't block.
Yeah,
so that makes them a lot worse. But
definitely, they can block creatures.
This card's obviously still good. Yeah.
A card that might seem kind of weird is Ragast, Deft Gastronaut. I had a deck with 2 of these that I got 4 wins with. There's a lot of weird text on it, but because it turns all your artifacts into food, and lets you sack food to deal 3 damage to each opponent, it basically has 1 tap, sack an artifact, deal 3 to each opponent. And on like a red-white aggro deck, which is what I had, it was just performed very well because this card can easily like burn your opponent for 9 damage in a game where you curved out. And that's just pretty unique for, it's just a 2 mana 2/2. It's not that bad. If you need to trade off with it on blocks, you can. But the fact that it can threaten to just burn your opponent out like almost single-handedly as long as you have artifacts in your deck is pretty unique.
That's good to know. I haven't seen this card in play yet. So.
Yeah, I think
there's
red-white
a lot of cards I haven't seen in play, but this one's hard to evaluate.
I think it's one of the worst color combinations too, to be honest. But when it works, I think
that makes sense.
It works out really well. Genomorph Imago. This card's amazing. In my 47 card deck, you can splash this card because what you're mostly playing towards is the 6/6 ability. This just attacks for 6 by itself a lot in the late game, but also with lander tokens and things like that, you can get in multiple combats, or maybe you don't attack with this, but you set up something else that has counters on it, or some ability. Just really good.
Makes sense. So that covers all the colors. We can have colorless cards. Of course, we're not going to cover all the colorless cards, but there are always colorless cards in formats where you pretty much always play them in your deck, which is nice. Are there any in this format that are like that?
Yeah, so at Common, I really only have Pinnacle Killship, but even that, if you have really good, usually it's like the Nebula Dragon and Rares and Mythics that are kind of competing with it, because 7 drops, there's not like that many at Common and Uncommon levels. You don't want to be clunked up on 7 drops. There are certainly a lot of better 7 drops than this in the sets, but yeah, if you're looking for a top-end card, and you don't have any in your pool besides this is going to fill that slot. It's colorless, so it ends up in a lot of my decks. All Fate Scroll. As soon as I'm a 3rd color, I'm playing the All Fate Scroll. Just a mana rock that can sack and draw 3 or more cards. If you get certain lands, it can draw more, stuff like that.
But not necessarily your 2-color decks. Huh?
Yeah, I think I avoided it in maybe multiple 2-color decks I had, in fact. Just because I don't want the mana lift so much. And 7 mana to draw 2.
And they're probably more streamlined anyways and all that. Yeah.
The Scrap Bot, probably 100% of my decks will play this card. Just similar to the 3 mana 3/3 green creature. I'd say it's worse, but it's colorless, so it's gonna make all your decks. Survey McCann. What is this? Oh, yeah. This one, you want to be more of a late game deck, but this ability is pretty real, especially as you play more colors. If you have 3-color deck, this can cost 7. By the time you have 7 lands, you probably have 3 different name lands, and the ability is, a Lightning Helix, draw 3 cards. Like, that's pretty good at stabilizing you.
Sphinx's Revelation.
Yeah, exactly.
Goes to outer space.
Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, I like this card. Also, this is the type of card where like sometimes it incentivizes you to splash because you want more lands with different names. So in a sense, you like splash for it by splashing another color a little bit.
Gotcha.
Rare and Mythic, Anti-Causal Siege. 100% of my decks would play this card. I could see no reason not to play it in your sealed deck.
That's been my experience. It feels like cheating when your opponent plays it, honestly, because it's so free.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I didn't get one of those. They just have to pay no deck building costs whatsoever.
Yeah. Extinguish Your Battleship. Like I said, closer to a green card, but excellent when... just excellent in general, but more excellent when you start playing some 5 toughness creatures, especially just like some 5 mana 5/5s. There's a common that gains 2 life, stuff like that.
I imagine the 5 is just really easy to crew, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, as long as you're not killing your own stuff. I mean, to be fair, when you're facing down green creatures, you can face an opposite issue with this card, which is why I kind of want to be on the green side of things, just to make sure you have some things that you're setting up with this yourself.
Makes sense. Plus, you get the ramp.
Yeah, exactly. It's 8 mana. You need to care. The End Stone, you probably need to care a little bit just because it's a 7-drop, but very good. Very annoying. At the beginning of each of your end steps, your life total becomes 10. I've lost to this card multiple times where it's like, yep, they play it and I could get them to 2, but that's completely useless to get them to 2. Like they're just going to get 10 next turn. You have to You could sometimes deck with this card, but if you play it early in the game, I don't think you have to worry about decking with it because you'll just run away on resources too hard to just close out the game. Drumming High Pool.
In terms of,
go ahead.
Real quick on this one, in terms of playing against it, do keep the decking thing in mind, though, like if you can't kill it, because that is an option to fight against it, because you can't turn off the card draw aspect of it, so they will draw a ton of cards.
But yeah, Endstone, probably almost every sealed deck. Next card here, Drumming High Pool, every sealed deck. Would not exclude it. Just
insane card.
You just need to find a window to play it where you like don't immediately lose or fall too far behind on life total. And the slivers, they have double strike on your opponent's turn too. Like you often don't start attacking with this card immediately. You just build up a massive board and kill them eventually.
So that covers all of the cards. We then have the lands. And there's obviously the special land sheet.
Yeah, so too. I'm going to lump that in. So at common, the only land is Command Bridge. But I play that in pretty much all my sealed decks, even 2-color ones. It's just fixing. It's worse than a lot of lands like it before, but I guess it's better than the ones that make you pay 1 mana because this has way more options to it. I've on turn 3 warped the use social engineering and played this, and you can tap the robot or the enchantment when you do that, like just things like that. Not that hard to squeak in, and it gives you good mana. Not as good as just like an on-color dual land, but yeah, decent fixing. The fixing, like I said, it's a little bit harder in this set, so when you get shocklands in your pool, I think it does matter a little bit. You just really want to pay attention to that because you might have some opportunities to play 3-color that most pools don't have, or things like that.
There's also a few cards that the different land names in your in play matter. So sometimes you'll play one, like if you're blue-black, you might play a Godless Shrine.
Yeah, I didn't mention this card, but there's like the 7-mana 5/5 that costs 1 less for each land thing you control. You can't really play that card before turn 5, but it costing less later in the game matters for double spelling.
Is this just for like your 4-color type of decks that are going to have lots of different lands?
Yeah, or like I had mentioned wanting a 5-mana 5/5 if you have that 8-drop, that's something to keep in mind. I had one of my games, it might have been for the trophy, I think, must have not been one of my trophy decks. Maybe it was a draft trophy. I played a Larval Scoutlander on turn 3 and got like 2 different basics, and or maybe I already had a Command Bridge in play or a Shockland. Anyways, on my opponent played a Tezzeret on an empty board, which obviously would have looked really good, and can't really imagine my Larval Scoutlander could attack it next turn on 5 mana because it needs 6 to crew. And I was able to play a 3-mana 5/5 of that card and the Gigastorm Titan, the 4/4 that cost 3 less, crew it and attack their Tezzeret that they had minus.
Nice. Interesting.
On turn 4, which was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Okay, so as far as the bonus sheet, which are cards, you'll encounter a fair amount in sealed. I'm going to start with kind of the fact that, so a lot of these are colorless. So I kind of made a list of ones I would maybe play, but then we've got some 2-color ones. So I'll just say, yeah, I pretty much always play these ones that can make 2 colors if they make colors you need. Mana Confluence is kind of a weird one because you need maybe to be a bit more aggressive, and I would not play it in maybe an only 2-color deck. But if you're like more of an aggressively slanted 3-color deck or 2-color splashing, that interests me more. I had one deck like that I got 6 wins with. It was like a green-white counters deck, splashing black for some removal. That type of archetype. There's 10 creature lands in the set. The ones originally from Oath of the Gatewatch, and then from from Worldwake, and then the ones from Oath of the Gatewatch and BFZ. They're mixed between 2 sets. Obviously, they're 2-color lands, and the ability to become mana sinks and turn into creatures is really powerful. But I have 3 of them that I think are above and beyond. These are the ones that if you've played a lot of Constructed over the last decade or more, you might recognize because they've seen the most play. They're Celestial Colonnade, Creeping Tar Pit, and Raging.
Baby.
Yeah. They're really good. 2 of them are evasive, so they're going to get in a lot of damage. I did 9 damage with my Creeping Tar Pits or stuff like that. I actually haven't had Colonnade yet, but I imagine it's pretty similar. I've had Raging Ravine multiple times. I had a game with Raging Ravine where it did my opponent's entire life total. I think it's like an actual bomb in this set. You find a window to like get it started growing. It's pretty much completely immune to removal, because if they like leave up an instant too, obviously you can stop activating it, and yeah, I just attack my opponent for 4, 5, 6. Then they're suddenly just chump blocking it until they ran out of creatures and they died, just single-handedly to my land.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Colonnade and Tar Pit are also kind of bombs.
Yeah, I have them up there in that category. But yeah, all the other 7, they don't scale in the same way, or they're not evasive. They're just gonna be good because they can get in some chip damage or be a land that trades for one of their creatures in combat, and that's still really good, but it's not the same as these cards. These cards, if I get them in sealed, I'm going to be looking to try to play color combos that can activate them.
Yeah, it's funny. They make their creature lands a lot more balanced nowadays when they make cycles of them, but I mean, even back in the day, these 3 were much better than all the rest of them.
Yeah, they've seen a lot more play in Constructed for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Other lands, I just want to point out. So Sunken Citadel, even though it has this weird, tap for 2 mana for lands text, it's your same old card that you've seen in a lot of limited sets where it enters tapped, you choose a color, and it taps for that color. So you probably should just play it.
Yeah, in every deck, probably.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Grove of the Burn Willows is a weird red-green land, but if you need red and green mana, which guess what? I think more often than not you will in the sealed format, or I guess the most pools. Lotus Field is kind of weird, but it is still fixing in that sense. And then also, I just wanted to point out there is that 2 and a blue, 3/2 that when it becomes tapped, you can untap a permanent you control. So that would be kind of interesting. I haven't seen that go on or anything, but just wanted to point out that if I had a Lotus Field in my pool, I'd be much more willing to play that 3 mana 3/2.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because I mean,
Lotus Field can be dangerous to play.
A little, yeah. But as long as you're not double spelling, it's gonna like fix your mana perfectly early still. If you play it on turn 3,
early-ish, yeah.
Yeah, you can't play a 3-drop on that turn, but you couldn't with a tap land anyways. But yeah, it is a little awkward that you can't play it on the first or second turn. I agree. Maybe you wouldn't always play it, but I'd be pretty interested in playing it.
Yeah, I'd be interested in playing it if I really wanted rainbow land, I think.
Yeah.
Like for 3+ colors type of thing.
So colorless lands. I got Ancient Tomb. This is hard to evaluate sometimes because in Constructed this card's really broken. Not even a card that's been legal in Modern ever. But Limited doesn't have, it has high costed cards, and I just think this trade-off is going to be worth it. It's kind of funny. I was not sure too much about it in a draft. I had a really interesting deck where I took Tezzeret over it in pack 3. So it was a really weird pick because there's like 2 really unique cards that I won't have very many opportunities to play with. And I actually, in one of the arena opens or arena directs, I played against Marcio and he played an Ancient Tomb. And that really reassured to me that you should probably be looking to play with this card because it is really powerful when it works.
Yeah, it's funny. I listened to Limited Resources, their limited review, and they didn't really like Ancient Tomb that much, him and Luis.
Gotcha.
Marshall and Luis. And I thought they were, I think they gave it a decent grade, but to me, it's I haven't played with it, to be fair, but to me, it just seems really good still.
Yeah, I'd say a little bit above decent is where I'd put it. I'm not sure I'd say it's like a complete bomb, but
that's where they put it,
gotcha.
To be fair.
One thing that helps is you can sack landers with this on certain turns and really get ahead. There's some things you can put this 2 mana into, but there's also just a lot of expensive cards.
I'll have to report back.
Marcio had the Godma in his deck. That's a card that really plays great with this card in your deck. Blinkmoth Nexus. So we're starting to get in the category with some of these. This colorless lands in particular, we should really consider playing them as like an 18th land because in this format too, you kind of want a lot of lands, but yeah, they offer some good value, but because they're colorless, they're gonna mess up your mana a little bit. But it's nice that they help you hit your land drops on key turns and then provide a little bit of value later.
Yeah, a lot of sealed formats lately. Honestly, I'll just play 18 land in a lot of decks if I feel like my curve is really high or my color requirements are tough. And Blinkmoth Nexus, I would say they're notably much worse than the dual land like Celestial Colonnade and whatnot.
Yeah,
but it's still nice
absolutely.
to be able to to make a creature out of your land.
Yeah.
Same with Mutavault, and I guess that's the only other one. But
yeah, to be clear, as draft picks, these cards might be kind of hard for me to find windows to pick them. But this is sealed, so they're just going to end up in your pool sometimes. And I'm just trying to point out when you would want to play them.
Totally.
I have some more on my list I'll read off. I don't really think they need that many details. Bonder's Enclave, Cathedral of War, Endless Sands. Those just all kind of you just do the thing with them. Endless Sands you can block or use in response to removal and save your guys for later. High Market I actually got a box with, and this one is pretty unique. Better in a black deck probably. the ability to sack something for effectively only 1 mana tacked on a land that your opponent pretty much can never interact with, it comes up a lot. It can trigger Void on a crucial turn, especially if you have these black things that you want to sack for value. Just in response to removal, you'll get some incidental life gain. I'd say I had the Lightless Evangel in my deck, so in combat, I was threatening to like sack my Gravpack Monoist to grow my Evangel if they were to block it. The big combo with it, I think, is actually Peregrine Beckoner. I was just warping that on one of my guys with an ETB, attacking, sacking it, gaining the life, getting my guy back, and then later casting it for 5 mana and making the same play.
Yeah, it definitely comes up more often than you think, especially once you get to the point of the game where you just leave it up all the time. It fizzles certain removal spells that gain value, does stuff. Yeah. It's hard to explain, honestly, but when you put it in your deck, you'll find
exactly
with it.
Yeah, it is hard to explain, but you just notice that you just end up making these plays where you use all your mana except for this high market, and it makes the game much more annoying for your opponent in some spots. And just incidental life gain even can matter a lot. In addition to some of the weird plays it opens up to having a sack outlet that is built into one of your lands. Kind of the same way that the station land, the planet lands just give you more options. It's kind of similar to that.
Save for Celestial Colony, and I think my favorite land on this list is Strip Mine.
Strip Mine, yeah. Just to add, so yeah, Mutavault, Mystifying Maze, Strip Mine, those I think are a little bit more obvious. They just kind of do the things. Less obvious is Swarmyard, which I wouldn't have come to mind unless I had played against it one time, and I noticed there's quite a few green insects. I haven't even checked the other types, but if you have these green insects, consider playing this as your 18th land, because that ability is really annoying when you have an insect. The Seed Ship Agrarian, the 4-mana 3/3 that when it comes tapped makes a lander, that's an insect. That might be one of the best ones, but that card, if you can just tap a land to regenerate it, that's really annoying for your opponent to deal with, like that. And this is just a waste, so if you're playing it as an 18th land, it's pretty little downside to include this in your deck. Just even if you just have one Seed Ship Agrarian in your deck, that combo is so potent that I'd probably really consider including this as like an 18th land. Or if you have some mana fixing, you don't have to play it. You could play it as 17th lands. My deck with High Market had a Watery Grave, and I only played 17 lands. Just stuff like that. And it wasn't very color intensive either.
Nothing to say about Strip Mine, huh?
Oh, I mean, yeah, play it. Probably really more likely you want to play that as an 18th lands, but
oh, for sure. I would consider it kind of like a spell.
Yeah, it's very much a spell. Yeah. It's like a spell on the front half, but just remember, it doesn't have to. You don't have to use it just because you can. Make sure that it makes sense to use it.
You make sure you don't strip mine yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll leave just for fun, and it's so unlikely to happen that I'm not afraid. I'll leave a little Easter egg here for anyone who's listened this far. If you pair Strip Mine with Ice Till Explorer and you screenshot it and put it in Discord, I'll buy you an Ice Till Explorer and send it to you.
Wow. Who knows how that deal will scale in the future?
Well, we're gonna assume that people will only listen to Edge of Eternities who are our patrons now, and we don't have that many right now, so it'll be okay.
But I mean, that combo is obviously really broken. If you have an Ice Till Explorer and a Strip Mine in your pool, then you could lean more heavily into playing that combo in green. I think I talked about this on the last episode, but playing like 2-card combos where both cards, as long as both cards are like at least passable individually, it comes up a lot in sealed. You see, always like 25% of your deck in the first 2 or 3 turns, and it's not often see half your deck in a game. Just these combos come together a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, is that everything?
Yeah.
Nice. Bit of a longer episode.
Yep.
It's kind of inevitable with sealed, and you have to talk about all the cards and which cards are good and whatnot. So thanks everyone for listening. If you didn't make it to the end and you're not hearing this, that's okay. And just remember that you have to listen. If our episodes are a reasonable length and you don't listen to the whole thing, then Riddle's going to come to your house and steal your petty change. So.
Wow.
I've been talking to him. I call Riddle sometimes, and he's very mischievous. No, just kidding. And I'm also kidding about I'm not actually kidding about the Ice Till thing, but maybe I should make it to where you have to do it while Edge of Eternities is the current.
There you go.
Current set. That way I don't get too screwed over. I have to eat my words. Okay, everyone.
I'll be sending the screenshot, I'm sure.
Oh, damn it.
I'll sign up for Patreon immediately.
Yeah. Till next time.
All right. So I just wanted to touch on the Arena Championship that happened last weekend, which was standard. 37 players. I guess it was 54% of them played as a Cauldron, so over half the field.
Holy moly.
Yeah. 7 of the top 8 decks.
Something to be alarmed about or not?
7 of the top 8 decks were also as a Cauldron, so maybe more alarming is that only one deck broke through and didn't even make top 4. I mean, it's just tough to do anything about it because, you know, I'd mentioned this when we talked about standard, but like you look at this deck and it's like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with this deck, right? Like, why wouldn't you play this deck if it's winning a lot? You know,
it is a really good deck.
It can do really powerful things starting on turn 3. It probably has some absurd sequence that lets it win on turn 3, but it has plenty of turn 4 wins. It plays a long game with Winter Night Stories and Prof's Eidetic Memory, and just the fact that you have a lot of selection with your rummaging. People sometimes add Quantum Riddler now, which gives you some more card advantage.
I was going to say, you know, when we talked about we did our pre-banning talk episode, you mentioned that they probably won't ban Profs, but that they maybe need to because it also fits in the same sort of category of like a 2-mana permanent that makes value.
Yep.
And obviously this deck, when it plays out, it feels like the villain is Cauldron and VV, but how much of this deck's power do you think comes from Profs?
I'd say the consistent part of this deck is Profs. Like, it's just this fallback
it's definitely
thing.
Like the backup plan,
exactly.
Right?
But it's a backup plan that your opponent has, like I was saying, they have like no favorable interactions with it, you know? Like, it's just a cycling card that makes their creatures really powerful the whole game. And yeah, you know, it just makes Tursa into a 5/5 haste, things like that. Sometimes more powerful. And then yeah, like the Cauldron VV is the broken part of the deck. But yeah, the Profs is just this like old reliable plan that this deck can have, and it's powerful enough to win games on its own, and there's not really good counterplay to it because you're trying to interact with a permanent that already drew a card.
Mm-hmm.
And it only costs 2.
Do you think
countering it is also, it's possible to counter it, but it's not easy.
Oh, definitely not. At least Cauldron, you could like, it could come into play, and you could maybe not have VV in their graveyard, or you could maybe clear their creatures and then answer it, and they don't really get you.
Yeah, or they like go
Profs.
to exile VV, and in response you like flood mod the Cauldron, and their VV's gone forever, and they didn't get any value, and it's a huge tempo swing in your favor. There's things like that. Mm-hmm. Not even a huge tempo swing because it's 1 mana, 2 mana, but more so to like if they have a Cauldron in their hand that might be useless now because the VV's exiled or something like that.
I was at my local RCQ. I was surprised by how many people were playing this deck because I know it's so expensive, and like I just didn't think it'd be super popular. But
yeah, you know, the bannings might have resulted just because people maybe were looking for a deck post-rotation and knew they could buy it.
Yeah, and now this happened. And I mean, does this look like something they need to ban to you?
I mean, if it's taking up this much of the format, they're just going to have to. I think they're really trying to not ban in standard in this offseason, though. But yeah, I mean...
Yeah, it's a tough spot.
I don't know what you can do because I just don't think you can let it happen like this. They're probably really hoping some tournaments with more, you know, Pinnacle Star Cages or whatever start popping up and taking things down. But
yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, when I was playing Blue-White Control, it felt like I was doing okay against this deck, but I have played a lot of brews that I'm just like, I totally fold to this deck.
Yeah, and like, let's take your example. Let's say Blue-White Control is favored against this deck. Believable. Mm-hmm. It's just like, I don't know. You think Blue-White Control is like fundamentally like a strong and powerful deck? Like,
I think it's good, yeah, but it's the kind of deck that people could beat if they wanted to pretty easily.
Yeah, like just
whereas Cauldron's not.
Yeah, and it's like even in this tournament, you know, at least one person I see played Azorius Control, and regardless of whatever their record was or how they did, I mean, obviously they didn't top 8 the tournament, but just that like a little under half their opponents weren't playing Cauldron, you know, so it's just like this thing where people are like, oh, well, if Cauldron's too dominant, maybe if there is something in the format that actually beats it, like, well, what do you mean, though? Like, you play a deck that's, like, 60% against Cauldron and just really bad against a bunch of other decks, whereas, like, this Cauldron deck is still going to beat these Izzet players sometimes, and It's just like the most powerful proactive thing you can do in the format, and also as grindy game. Like, it seems
the
pretty
math
problematic.
there is still just to play the Cauldron deck.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say blue, like, Control hasn't been good for a while in Standard, and Control actually has quite a few powerful tools now. So, but it's still the kind of deck that, I mean, like, you could easily tune blue-black midrange to beat up Control really easily, whereas I don't know what you would do against Cauldron with blue-black midrange.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess if they ban something, they have to ban Cauldron. I mean, they could ban VV, but
yeah, they'll probably just hit Cauldron
because Cauldron was up for rotation in a 2-year tough spot.
Yeah,
I don't.
I'm not very excited for the Standard tournament I was gonna go to. I think I'm pretty much set to still go to Phoenix and visit, but I might honestly only play the Sunday Modern event and focus on playing the qualifier weekend on my phone while I'm there, or even bring a laptop.
Okay,
but
yeah, that's a shame. It's there's a lot of cool things going on in Standard, and there's a lot of cool decks, I think, besides the VV Cauldron. But the VV Cauldron really over the last couple weeks have really it's made a lot of other decks just not very realistic.
Yeah, do you know the one deck that made top 8
competitive sense
that wasn't Cauldron? It was Temur Ferocious.
The
deck comboing the Trailblazer and Battlecryer.
I did see that. Yeah.
Which, I don't know if it's a Shahar Shenhar original, but he's certainly the one that made it popular.
Gotcha. Funny. Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a small tournament, so anyone could have done well with any deck.
And these people also all qualified in various like different formats when you think about all the qualifier weekends that lead up to this. So like some of these people just might not have very much Standard experience at all, and they might just be like, yep, I played this deck. I played, what everybody told me was the best deck, and I didn't try other decks.
Yeah. The Pioneer, I remember there was a Pioneer Arena Championship where that was the top 8 was it all or almost all mono red decks? Something like that.
It might have been, it was all mono red decks, and the stat was on day 2, the mono red decks had a 100% win rate against non-mono red decks.
Woo!
So they only...
Yeah, and in Pioneer you could argue that mono red's the best deck, and it's kind of a problem, but it's not nearly as bad as that tournament would make it seem.
Yeah.
So like maybe our Standard is kind of like that, but guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, hopefully some decks pop up as being reasonable answers, but it's hard to tell from here. But yeah, I'm a little optimistic at least that, like, you think the Arena Championship is demonstrating maybe some mastery of people absolutely certain that Cauldron's the best deck, but I also think it could just be some shortcutting of like, I know this deck's solid, I'm just going to only practice this for this tournament. I qualified for this tournament with Limited or with Alchemy or whatever,
Yeah, I'd be more confident in it if it was like a Pro Tour and this happened.
Yeah, or if the format was a little bit older too, it is a fresh format.
Sure.
So trying to innovate here is just not maybe worth it. Especially the incentives are weird too, because like, you're playing 7 rounds on day 1 now that I'm looking at it, and you just like don't want to be in like the bottom 10 players roughly to make day 2 and qualify for the Pro Tour. So
you're incentivized to just sort of pick a safe choice.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically.
Yeah.
Cool.